So what I like to do to start the presentation is before we launch into the program itself, I like to talk a little bit about a philosophy of what ClientTrack is and why we created it the way we did. Because the first thing, in order to be able to explain how the program works from a training point of view, we want to make sure that everybody's on the same page and explaining what the entire goal of the program itself is. So if you look at your practice, generally you can divide your practice into two halves. If we look at it from a very high level point of view, the first half, of course, is um, your compliance and practice management and your bookkeeping, all that kind of stuff. That's your skill, that's your profession, that's what all of you are very good at, and that's why you went into the business in terms of accounting and bookkeeping as accounting professionals. The second half to your practice is the client management. And I think we can all be honest and say that we completely underestimated how much client management would be involved when we first started out. So what we find is if we really look at where we're spending all of our hours and minutes in a day, that much of our time is occupied in what I'm calling client management. So client management is taking all the telephone calls, answering emails, dealing with the customer service aspect, being on hold with CRA, trying to chase down information, all that type of stuff. If we look at our ideal scenario, the perfect world would be the client would interact with us at a minimum just to give us the information we need in terms of the bank statements, credit card statements, all that information. We would then take that information, which of course in a perfect world would be complete, and would be everything we need, and we would be able to spend 90% of our time being billable, doing the tax compliance and bookkeeping and all the financial planning and that sort of stuff. When we look at the real world, our ideal scenario is much different than that. Sometimes we're finding that we're spending more than half of our day in what we could classify as client management. So instead of being in a position where we're 90% billable in the ideal scenario, we find that we're much less, 50, sometimes 40% billable when we really take a hard, honest look at where we're spending our time. So in order to grow our practices and become more profitable and be more efficient, one of the things that we want to look at from a major point of view is reducing that client management down. So if we can reduce that client management down to a much more reasonable, say 30% of our time, then that means that we're now 70% billable, which is actually very good. And by being billable, we're also much more organized. We can take on more clients. We can take on more staff and train them and get them up to speed very quickly, very efficiently, so that they can become a productive member of our team. So in order to do all that, we sort of want to think of our practice as an assembly line. So if we break out everything into pieces and we understand which pieces are costing us money and which pieces we're doing very well at in terms of efficiency, then we know which problems of our assembly line we need to fix to repair any bottlenecks and that kind of thing. And I really want to emphasize on explaining this because that whole philosophy is a large part of what ClientTrack ends up giving you in terms of a value solution. So the first thing is ClientTrack gives you the ability to divide things into the assembly line process, to be able to see exactly where files are at, what the status is, and where you are within the process towards completion. It also gives you the ability to understand how we can fix it and make it better. So by explaining these concepts up front, we're basically setting the stage to how ClientTrack works from a conceptual point of view and how we can sort of divide our business and do it that way. Okay, so now that we've looked at things from a high level point of view, what we now want to look at is drilling that down a little bit. So ClientTrack itself as a software package is entirely helping you on the client management side. It's understanding which tasks you need to do, who's working on what, has the client brought the information in, the client's telephone calls, all that type of stuff. So now let's take a look within that client management bubble. And from our point of view, we've taken that client management bubble and we divided it into 5 main areas. And these are areas that we're constantly looking at. How can we improve? So that comes into our little PowerPoint that I've got on the screen here. So if we look at our PowerPoint, you can see that we've got 5 key issues that accounting professionals face on a daily basis. And these are the issues that we're taking a hard look at, and these are the issues that we're working to solve. So the first issue is determining which deadlines are due. So before you can do anything in your office in terms of tracking which tasks, whether the clients have brought the information in, and knowing whether you've got everything completed, you have to have a definitive list of all the tasks that you need to do. So the idea is that if you, number one, have a really good complete list that works well so that you don't miss anything, that's the first problem you need to solve. Because if we can't solve that problem, then all the other problems are inferior to that. So the very first thing is we have to have a definitive list of all the things we need to do that's easily searchable and trackable so that we don't miss anything. All right, so the second issue that we're trying to solve of our 5 is notifying our clients of their upcoming deadlines. So this gets into the client management domain of things. So we want to, again, think of things like an assembly line, and we also want to understand that we're dealing with human beings as clients. And these human beings are wonderful, dynamic people, most of whom have, set up their own business and run corporations and, do very exciting things on their end. Now, one of the things that we have to acknowledge is that accounting and bookkeeping generally are not a priority for many of our clients. Now, we might have a few rare breed of clients that really understand the value of being up to date with the bookkeeping, understand what balance sheets are, and really look at their numbers. And those are the great clients because they're the clients that want to make sure their numbers are up to date, they're on top of them, they understand their cash flow, their profit and loss, and all that type of stuff. But the reality is those types of dynamic people that have a really good financial sense are not a typical business owner. A typical business owner would have a wonderful skill set where they're providing a service or a product, and they're very good at providing that service or product. But often that person may not have the best financial skills and that kind of thing because a lot of us didn't go to school for that kind of thing. The point that I'm trying to make is that for many of our clients, we're often chasing them for the bookkeeping, and the client themselves are prioritizing their bookkeeping accounting much further down their list of things that they need to do. They're much more personally interested in their own cash flow, their ability to make sales and to deal with their own clients. So we get into a situation and we have to acknowledge this, because if we acknowledge it, then we're in a much better position to solve it. And we have to acknowledge that our clients don't consider their accounting and bookkeeping to be a high priority, which means they keep putting it off to the bottom of their to-do list, which makes our job more difficult. So what we want to think about, and this is something that I'm going to stress over and over again during our training today and tomorrow, and it's also a large part of the new features that we've added into the Client Track very recently in terms of the online portal, which I'm very excited to talk about later in today's session, and also our ability to add specific documents. So the clients, again, if they get a nice list of documents from us and they know exactly what we need from them and by when, the clients are much more likely to give us those documents because we've given them a call to action. We've told them, I need this exact list of documents. And when I say exact list of documents, and this is what I'm going to show you in the program, so this is the part of the new stuff, is that we now have the ability to be able to send an email to the client and say, hey, we need your Visa card statement ending 546. We need your monthly credit card statement for MasterCard ending in 1234. We need the bank statement for the TD Bank, and we need the bank statement for your savings account in CIBC, and we need your PayPal export. So instead of just being able to call the clients and say, hey, bring your stuff in, with stuff being quote unquote a generic term, you're now telling the client exactly what they need to remind them so that they don't forget that credit card statement. But more importantly, we have this new date, and I'm going to talk about this, but I really want to emphasize this because this is part of the process, called an info deadline date. And this is new in ClientTrack. So you now have the ability to, in the email when you send it to the client, say, hey, this is what we need, and we need it by this date. So let's say you're working on a monthly GST return, and that GST return needs to be filed by the end of the month. They get the email at the beginning of the month when their period N ends and says, this is what we need. We need your information by the 10th of the month. So you are giving them a very specific deadline date on when they must give you the information by. And it seems like a minor change, but it does make a huge difference from the client's point of view, because you're now giving the client a specific call to action to get their stuff in by. Because otherwise, the client's just going to bring in their stuff later and later and later, and they're going to learn that they can bring this stuff to you 5 days before the task is due, and you might not like it, but you're going to get the stuff done, and then you're going to have many of your clients bringing it to you the last minute, and then your month ends become very, very busy, and you get stressful, and nobody likes that. So by giving your clients a very, very specific call to action, you're getting the information at a much earlier date, and you're getting it from your clients much more often by that earlier date. Okay, so I'm going to talk about this a lot more when we get into the actual training, but I just wanted to sort of open the window to the kinds of things that we're going to be talking about. All right, so issue number 3 is managing your workload to get everything done on time. So you've got clients that are bringing you tasks on different days. Some of it's complete, some of it's not complete. You've got staff that are looking to say, okay, what can I do right now based on that A, it's in our office, B, it's complete, and there's nothing that's holding it up. So, and that's what we call a workflow. And that's where the concept of an assembly line comes in. And I'm going to refer to that again quite a bit because it's a really, really good concept to think of. So we want to think of doing our filing as literally making a car. And in order to make the car, we need all the pieces of the car to start. So if the pieces aren't in, then we can't start making the car. So we need to know which files we can work on right now that are complete and ready to go. And we need to be able to find that information quickly and do all that kind of stuff. So workflow is a huge part of what ClientTrack does, so that you don't have to spend the time doing what I call the hunt and seek. So the hunt and seek is all that time you waste looking for work. So you finish a job and you say, okay, I now need to find more work. I want to know what next I can work on. So you flip through the pile of paperwork that's on your desk and you open some folders and say, okay, I can't work on this. That's right. I'm missing this. You put that aside. Oh yeah, that's right. I can't work on this because I'm doing this. So then you go over to the filing cabinet, you look through that and that sort of thing. So you're spending a discrete amount of time looking for what you can do next instead of just being able to pull it up on the screen. And that's what ClientTrack is designed for. All right, so issue number 4 is tracking what paperwork the clients have brought in. So, and this is where our new update really excels, because you now have the ability to specify exactly which documents you need from the client, and by having our new portal, you have the option of allowing clients to give you those files through a web browser. Now, I really want to emphasize this in a moment. We know that many of your clients are not interested in file sharing and giving you files in a digital format and PDFs and all that kind of stuff. We're very, very aware that the vast majority of your clients still just want to drive by your office, walk in the front door, and plop down a whole pile of paperwork every month to give you it. In this day and age, it's still a lot easier for the clients just to be able to do that than to have to worry about scanning or giving you digital copies and doing all that kind of stuff. We're all very busy, and sometimes technology doesn't make things a whole lot easier. It just makes things a little bit more accessible, for example. So, and I want to be very clear, even though we've created this new online portal, which is all about the whole digital file sharing and that kind of thing, that's very, very important for the evolution of ClientTrack, because you need the digital file sharing with the banking level security, and you need all that type of stuff. But we also are very aware that, again, in the real world, many of your clients still operate in quote unquote the old-fashioned world, where they give you the raw paperwork in paper format and you work from there. Okay, so we just want you to be aware that we know that. All right, issue number 5 is tracking your time and you doing your AR. So we're going to be looking at this in tomorrow's half of the workshop in terms of the time and billing and that kind of thing. All right, so I appreciate your patience and listening to my little introduction. But as I said at the beginning, I think it's very, very important that we set the stage for what it is a Clienttrack does, what our goal is, and what we're giving you in terms of a tool and what your return on investment is going to be. So I think this talk is important to do that. So having said that, let's launch now into the Clienttrack training. All right, so here we have Clienttrack itself. Okay, and again, I just want to emphasize what I just said at the beginning. I like to talk for about 15 minutes and then we take a 10-minute break. So we'll take a 10-minute break each hour. I don't want to overwhelm you too much, and I think breaks are really good just to refresh. I also want to really get you to understand that this training is, from your point of view, is not about you remembering every single little button we clicked and everywhere we go. There's a lot of content in this, which is why we divided over 2 days, and each day is 3.5 hours. So that's a lot of content, but we need that amount of time in order to show you the whole program from start to finish, because Clienttrack grown into quite a very comprehensive end-to-end solution for accounting professionals in Canada. The thing I want to show you is if you go to support and you go to Online Help Center, there's an online user manual that basically goes through in detail everything that I'm going to show you. So use that as a way to remind yourself on which button to click and all the details and all that type of stuff. So the intent of today's session is more for you to sit back, relax, watch what I do, and listen to when I explain why we designed the program to work the way we did, so that we can help you solve some problems that you may not have been aware the Clienttrack could solve. And also for you to understand why we created the program in the way we did, so that you can see how it's going to add value to your particular office. Okay. So let's start from the very beginning. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at setting up the users. So I'm going to go to users and I'm going to go to manage users. Okay, so in the manage user thing, first of all, I can add my users. Okay, so if I wanted to add a new user, I would just simply click add new user and I would be able to add all my users. You want to make sure that all the people associated with your business are in here from start to finish. That includes contractors, it includes full-timers, everyone. Because even if they aren't using Clienttrack directly from a software point of view on their actual computer, you still want to have their name as a user so you can assign them to work and you can see who's assigned to what for your own information purposes. The next thing you do is for each user, you can set up the user privilege, which allows you to identify full user, power user, edit, and so on and so forth. And then we have an active status. Okay, so this is important because you're going to have staff turnover for whatever reason. Some of your staff are going to retire, others are going to leave to take other jobs, and different things are going to happen. So as staff come and go, you don't want to delete them. Now, we do have a delete user feature here, and of course that's important because there are some rare reasons where you do want to delete a user. Maybe you accidentally added them or you added the same person in twice and that sort of thing. But once you have a user that's been in the system for a while and they've had many, many appointments and tasks assigned to them, you don't want to delete them after the fact, because if you delete them, you're effectively creating a hole in the system. Now, when you delete a user, we're not going to delete all the time and the appointments and the tasks that they were assigned to. They're all still going to be there. But when you go to open that task after the fact, and Clienttrack is going to say, okay, here's the task, but the user is unknown because you deleted them from the system. So much better is to set them to inactive. Okay, so if I click on a user, I would be able to set that user to inactive. And you can see that that changed the check marks here. So the check marks were removed from viewed an appointment calendar, assigned to new tasks and projects, and assigned to new personal tax returns. So for those three settings, though, this user is no longer applicable for those three things. However, they're still available to be searched in the appointment section, and they're still available to be searched in the task section, which is important because you want their name to be available to search for historical stuff, but you don't want them to be assigned to any new tasks and projects. Okay, so that's how you deal with inactive users. So my point is don't delete users, set them to inactive after they've been in your system for a while. All right, and here's where you can set the passwords. And on the time and billing side, and we'll touch on this much more tomorrow, you can set the user permissions to prevent users from being able to see all your revenue and AR, and you can also prevent users from being able to see any time or time information entered by other users. So you can restrict them to only time information for themselves. All right, so that's basically the user control panel. So on the client side, let's actually start from scratch, and I'm going to set up a brand new client from scratch, and I'll walk you through the process, and we'll schedule tasks, and we'll set up the different options and that kind of thing. So I'm going to click the button here, Add Client, and I'm going to call this New Workshop Client. Okay, and I would be able to put in the address, the telephone number, the email. So let's just do that real quick. Okay, so I can do 101 Corporate Lane. Okay, so we'll say the city is Vancouver. Okay, so province would be British Columbia. Okay, postal code, so on and so forth, and telephone number, and so on and so forth. Now, we have an email address under the company side, and you can do that. You can use that email for their general inbox. So I'm just going to say info@workshop.com. Okay, now the email is not necessarily mandatory for the company, because we're going to add personnel, and the email address is generally added to the people themselves, not to the company. But if you wanted a generic sort of email address out of the company, the option is there. The next thing that you want to think about is these two fields. So we have something called supervising partner and managing accountant. Okay, so the idea is that you can assign ownership of this client to internal staff within your organization. So we have clients of all kinds of sizes. We have many one-person bookkeepers, and we have many larger firms with formal partners and managers. So regardless of what size of company you are in terms of an accounting practice, this is still a good thing. Now, you may decide you only need one level and not both. But if we take the traditional partner model where you have a firm, and the firm might have 2 or 3 partners, what you can do is you can assign each client to the partners respectively. So let's say Lisa is one of our partners, and this new client is going to be assigned to Lisa. I'd be able to choose Lisa's name as a partner versus, say, the other partner who might be Susan. Okay, and then now Lisa's assigned as a partner, but the managing accountant is the name of the accountant or bookkeeper, the accounting professional that's actually assigned to the client to do the bulk of the work. When the client calls in, this is the person that knows and understands the file. This is the person that generally interacts with the client, and so on and so forth. So I could put David's name as the managing accountant. Now, depending on your size, you may realize that you don't need the 2 levels, and you can just assign the managing accountant level. This is really, really nice, because what it means is that I, as David, is going to be assigned to a subset of all the clients. But by putting my name as the internal owner of this, it allows me to do searches. So I can search by tasks, by time, by all kinds of different items for only my clients that have been assigned to me. So by doing this, it gives you a lot of value to filter clients by groups based on the internal ownership. Okay, so let's take a look at the associated professionals. So associated professionals are multi-line fields. So I can type multiple lines in here that allow me to indicate who what other professionals outside of my accounting professional organization I interact with in regards to this client. So we've created this new client, new workshop client. So under associated professionals, under bank information, I can say, okay, they bank with the TD Bank. The main account number is, and I can put in their main business account. Let's say that they're interacting with a loans officer. They're applying for a small business loan, and there's a specific a person at that bank that they're dealing with in terms of that loan. I would be able to put in that person's name, phone number, and contact information right into this box. Let's say that there's a law office. This client is applying for trademark or patent intellectual property, and we're working with a law office that specializes in intellectual property. I'd be able to put in the law office, the insurance, the financial lenders. If I'm working with CRA specifically, and I'm assigned to a case officer, I can put the name of the case officer there. Okay, so under personnel, this is where I would list all the people who work for this particular company. So obviously the company owner, but I could also, if there's another bookkeeper that works for this company, I can put the bookkeeper's name in. I can, employees and that kind of thing. So it's a list of all the people that work for this particular company. So let's just put in an example. So I'm going to put in Sam Smith, and I'm going to click Add. Okay, so there's Sam Smith. And what I can also do is, because ClientTrack also allows you to track the personal tax returns, Sam Smith has also asked us to do his T1 return. So right here, all I have to do is click this check mark, and Sam Smith will also be added to the T1. And this is nice because it means that I don't have two separate lists of people on the business and their personal tax section. It's there's only one sort of database of people, but I can link them to multiple services. So I'm linking Sam to the T1 list. And it also means that it doesn't matter where I edit Sam. So if Sam moves or the telephone number and email changes and I make that change, I can make that change in the T1 section, or I can make the change in the business section, and it'll reflect in both because there is only one Sam which is linked. So I don't have to worry about updating two different Sams. I just update the one. All right, so under business info, you can see that I have a check mark here. It says inherit following address. So it gives me, it automatically pulls the address from the company itself. Okay, so if I remove the inherit feature, then I can edit the address directly. But if I enable it, then it disables the fields, but it pulls the fields directly from here. And that's really nice because if I add 10 employees to this particular company and the company picks up and moves, all I have to do is change the main company address, and I don't have to worry about changing the address for each of the 10 people because it's automatically going to inherit the change from the main company and update the address, the business address for each of the 10 employees. All right, so I'd be able to say, okay, this person is the owner, they are a shareholder, and they have, for example, 100% ownership. Okay, and I'd be able to put in, the job title, address, phone number, and here's the email. So I was explaining that I don't necessarily need an email for the company, but it is very important for me to have an email address for each individual. So this one would be sam@workshop.com. Okay, so the email address is usually associated directly with each of the people. So again, if I have 10 employees for this company, I would have 10 different email addresses for each employee, which is exactly what I want because I want to be able to identify which of those people I want to send an email to. Okay. Under personal information, this is where I can add the home information, contact information, social insurance number, and this is again important. So ClientTrack itself on the desktop, the data is stored locally on your system, so you don't have to worry about sensitive information too much. And the social insurance number is really the only one piece of information within ClientTrack that would be considered something that you would be worried about from a privacy point of view. All the other information is information already in the public domain on their websites in terms of their address information, contact information, telephone numbers, and that sort of thing. Now, what I want to stress is we do, if you implement our new cloud portal, which is I'll describe in a moment later on in our presentation, we do not synchronize or push the social insurance number up into the cloud information. Okay, so we keep the social insurance number only saved locally on your secure data server, which will be your own servers within your office. All right, if you have more questions about that, just let us know. We'll be more than happy to elaborate. And I'll be talking a little bit more about our security and the portal a little bit later in about an hour or two in our demo here. Okay, but I just want to stress that social insurance number is really the only true private piece of information, and it stays on your computer. It does not go to the portal. Okay, so we have a second email address on the personal side. So if you wanted to have two email addresses, you can do that, but really you only need the one email address on the business side. So it's just personal information. Spouse information, so you can indicate that they have a spouse, what the marital status is, and the spouse information. You can link family members, and under other, this is where we have an alternate address, custom information, and we have notes. Okay, all right. So we're back to here now. We've added Sam Smith as a list of staff to our company, which is a new workshop client. We've got our associate professionals where we've entered in the bank information, and then we have under here all other. So we have an alternate address on the business side. So if this company has a secondary location or warehouse location or something like that, I can enter that address as a secondary alternate address. And then we have custom information. So we have groups of custom fields everywhere within the program, and they're always associated with whatever we're editing at the moment. So at this point, we're editing a company. So you can see here that a group of 5 custom fields. So the idea is the label that I assign here is global, meaning it changes for all clients. Okay, we know that we're not going to have fields for every single thing that we can think of. So, we do already have, for example, website, Facebook, and Twitter, all the major stuff. But there are going to be some situations where you're going to want to record specific information that we don't have a specific field for. So a good example is property tax. So we don't have a built-in property tax field. But let's say CRA requires that you put the municipal roll number, property tax number on a form in order to get a CRE rebate of some kind or something like that. Or you need the property tax to file the municipal property tax form, something like that. You would be able to define the field property tax. So I'm going to go define custom fields, and I have named the first field property tax. And again, that label is the same for all companies. Okay, so whenever I edit any company, that label property tax is going to be sitting there for all companies. Now, whatever information I type in is specific for the company. So if I say the property tax for this company, is something like that, then that's specific to this company. But the label itself is global and applies to all companies. Okay, the notes here is just that. It's notes for this company. But what's interesting about these notes, and I want to explain this because this is good for best practices, is there's we can enter notes about different things everywhere depending on what we're recording the notes for. But often in terms of the client notes, there's often times where we need to enter a note, but we want people to be able to see that note right on the screen every time they pull up the client's profile. So we're not talking about communication notes or anything like that. We're talking about a note, for example. Let's say that this client prefers not to be called before lunchtime. So they'd like to have a quiet morning to get a lot of work done, and they prefer to receive calls from other people after lunch in the afternoon. So you want to make a note of that, and you want your staff to be able to see that note every time they pull up this client's profile to look at the telephone number. Because if they have to click somewhere else to find the note, they're never going to see it and they're going to miss it all the time. So this is why these notes are particularly good for that, is whatever I type in this little box appears right on the home screen here so that I can see the notes. Okay, so let's use that example. Do not call before 12 p.m. Okay, All right, so now we filled in the information and we're going to go OK. And so the summary screen here shows me virtually everything I've typed in. It shows me that Lisa is the partner, David Merritt is assigned as a managing accountant, shows me the email address, it shows me the the mailing address here, the property number we typed in, and there is the note that we typed in. So it's on the home screen. Nobody has to click anywhere else to be able to see that note, and it's sort of front and center. So if somebody's looking up, for example, the telephone number, which I didn't enter, they would also on the same screen see the note and say, oh yeah, that's right, the client doesn't like to be called before 12, we'll do that. All right, and then over here on the right, I can see the information for the people that work for the company. In this case, Sam Smith. I can see that he's a default contact. I can see his email address and that kind of thing. Now, you can see that I can clearly highlight things, so I can copy things. So in the Windows operating system, if you hold down the control key and you hit C, that's a global copy command that the Windows operating system recognizes. So if I highlight something, it's going to copy whatever I've highlighted. So let's say that I wanted to take this the address and insert it into a document really quickly. So I just go Control C on my keyboard to copy it. And if I, for example, open up a notepad or a Word document or anything, and then in here I go Edit, Paste, it pastes in what I've just copied. So this is a quick way to be able to take an address or an email or a telephone number or anything that I've got on the screen and quickly paste it into another application to send an email or to draft up a letter or to do anything like that. So that's another neat little trick that is within the program. All right, so now let's actually start looking at scheduling things for this client. So let's start with the client services provided. So the client services provided is a nice series of checklists that allow you just to indicate roughly what services you provide for this particular client. So you've sat down and you've drafted up a contract and privacy policy, and you say, okay, we are going to provide you with GST services. We're going to do your payroll, remit, and your payroll. The difference is payroll remit is the source deductions due on the 15th of each month, whereas the payroll themselves would be the paycheck service, where you're figuring out the paychecks, say weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, that kind of thing. All right, and then you say you do the year-end and the corporate tax. Let's say WSIB, and let's say the bookkeeping. Okay. Now, you can edit this list of services here. So if I go Customize List, I can edit this list of services if I want to. So, over here, I've got financial consulting. So let's say I don't do any financial consulting, but let's say we provide online support for something. So you can write online support. So you get the idea. So you can modify this list of services you provide so that a little bit customizable. And again, anything that I change is going to change for all clients. So that change to online support will be there for all clients. Okay, by clicking the GST checkmark, for example, I have not actually scheduled GST or HST. Nothing's happened here. All I've done is I've just indicated from a high level that we do GST. Okay, under the HST, which we'll come to in a moment, I would still need to be able to schedule the quarterly, the monthly tasks. All right, so the other neat thing that I can do here is we have what we call a triple check. So let's say that we provide online support. So if I click here, it becomes a normal check mark. If I click a second time, you can see that it becomes grayed out. And then if I click a third time, it goes away completely. So you can use that grayed out status to indicate anything you want. But a really great way to use it is you can use it as a way to indicate what services you want to provide to the client. So let's say with this particular client, when they started out, it was just run by one individual, Sam here. Okay, And let's say that you found out after a year or two working with this client and doing their accounting and bookkeeping that Sam has grown and he's hired several more people. So you want to make a note. So we're going to change both the payroll remit and payroll to the grayed out status. So that's telling me in this case that we don't yet do the payroll, but we've just found out that Sam has grown and hired a couple staff members. So that means the next time we talk to Sam, either on the phone or he's coming in the front door to drop off information, that we want to remind ourselves to have a conversation with Sam and say, hey, congratulations on hiring a few people. This is, really great to see that you're growing your business. Why don't you come in and we'll spend a few minutes and we'll sit down and we'll look at adding the payroll services to the service we offer so that we can provide more value to you. Okay, so it's a way for you and your staff to indicate that you don't yet do the service for them, but you want to do them. So it's a marketing thing, because we are first and foremost business owners, and it's much easier to generate more revenue by providing more services to our existing clients than it is to go out and find brand new clients as new ones. So it's good for us to be able to recognize more sources of revenue for existing clients. So this is a way for us to mark off which additional sources of revenue we want to have a conversation about. All right, so the last thing that you can use this client services provided for is you can use it to control the tabs along the top. Okay, so the tabs along the top, basically, these are all the tabs that are available within ClientTrack right now. So it breaks out all the major government and provincial taxes that you're generally going to schedule most of your tasks for. Now, you can see here I've got a tab here called Lawyer. And it's meant for if you have lawyers as clients, the lawyers often require you to do special services like quarterly law levy deadlines, monthly trust account reconciliation, law pro applications, and that kind of thing. But many of our clients come to us and say, okay, that's really nice, but I don't have any lawyers as clients, so I want to hide this tab because it's not relevant to me in my business. So if you click the search item here and you go to tab options, you can control the tabs. So I'm going to do two things. I'm going to click on the Lawyer tab, and I'm going to remove the check mark to indicate the tab is visible. So when I go close, now the Lawyer tab disappears. Okay, so I can get it back. All I have to go is go back to tab options, click on Lawyer, and then just put the check mark back. So it's not gone permanently, but it is gone so that I don't clutter up the tabs. Now the other thing I can do is if I go tab options and I click this check mark, display only tabs that are checked. Okay, so it says display only the tabs that are checked in the accounting services information. So we're going to go close. All right, so what that does is based on the check marks that I have checked here, it makes the relevant tabs visible here. So for example, if I go to the next client, if you watch these tabs along the top, you're going to see them change when I go from client to client. So we go to the next tab. Okay, see how they changed? And they changed based on what check marks I have available for that client. So if I check off that we now do GST services, you can see that right now because the check mark is not checked, the GST tab is not visible. So once I check it, it just appeared. And of course it's called HST because I'm configured for Ontario. So, and then again, if I uncheck it, then it disappears. Okay, so that check mark here, if we go back to tab options, and it's right down here, it says display only tabs. What it does is it links the check marks here to the tabs so that the tabs are visible and not visible based on here. So that's just sort of a neat feature. So if you like that, you can activate that. All right. So the next thing I'm going to show you, and I'm going to take a break soon, is the Find Client feature. So if I go Find Client, I can quickly find the client by typing in the client's name. So the first Find Client box is strictly off the client's name, and I have a list of all the clients here. Okay, the second search feature, the second box is search by criteria. So this allows me to find a client by anything I want. So if I type in a telephone number that ends in 1458, that's all I remember. I don't remember the rest of the telephone number. I can search for that. So I'm going to go 1234 and go find. So what it does is it searched all the information, numbers, telephone numbers, email addresses, everything, business numbers, and came up and said, hey, I found a telephone number for Sample Beauty Salon where the end matches what you typed in, 1234. Okay, so this is also really, really good because it's for searching things like business numbers. So when Revenue Canada calls you and you pick up the phone and say, okay, we have a question about the GST return you filed, and they ramble off a business number, you'd be able to type in the business number or corporate tax number or anything like that. So any kind of number you can do a search for. Okay. Now we have a quick search. So if I go search and I do the same thing here, I just type in 1234 or a client's name or anything and click search, it does the exact same thing. Whoops, sorry. So I'll do that again. So if I type in and I click the little binoculars here, then it comes up with the results. Same thing if I want to quickly jump to the clients that start with S. I can do that and it just quickly jumps to clients that start with an S, for example. Okay, so the next thing I want to show you is they can change the status of the active status. So we're in a client here called George's Auto Body. And let's say that for many, many years, George was an active client. And then George retired and he wound down the business and he gave it to somebody else and he's no longer one of our clients. So we want to change this client from active to inactive. So in the same way that with the users, I was recommending that you don't want to delete the client, this is the same philosophy. You don't want to delete George's Auto Body because delete means delete, meaning you're going to lose all the information, lose the records, and that's not what you want. You want a record of all of your work. But George is no longer an active client. You no longer do work for them. So you just simply change the toggle and change this client from active to inactive, and you click OK. Okay. So there's a couple things that happen. So the client is still visible, still searchable, and just classified as inactive. But what that means, if you go to HST, see how there's a line here that says these GST tasks will not appear in the task view. Okay, so I've got quarterly HST tasks scheduled for this client, and I'll show you how to schedule them in a moment. And I can see the due dates. So we completed the February and May, but we don't have to worry about the August and November because the client's now inactive. So these tasks no longer exist for us to do. So, but they still show up here in the list. But it's very clear here, these tasks will not appear in a task view. So even though I can see them here under the client's profile, they will not show up in my list as an active item for me to do. And again, we're going to talk about this list a little bit later in the training. Okay, so that's the important part of the active thing is when you make a client inactive, all the tasks and stuff will no longer appear in your active list, which is basically exactly what we want. All right, so I think this is a good time to take a break. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a 10-minute break. So right now, by my clock in the corner in Eastern Standard Time, it's 12:52. She just turned 12:53. So let's round this up. We're going to come back at 1:05. So we're going to come back at 5 minutes past the hour in whatever time zone you're in, and we're going to continue the training. I'm going to show you how to set up all the tasks and do that kind of thing, and then we're going to get into the document management in the portal by the time we wrap up for the day. Okay, so we're going to take about a 12 or 15-minute break. So we're going to come back at 5 minutes past the hour. Okay, thank you very much. All right, welcome back, everyone. Okay, so we're going to continue on. So now we're going to look at the task setup. Okay, so it's important that we get the task set up right, because as I was talking about earlier in the PowerPoint presentation, I was saying that the step one of those 5 issues that we're trying to accomplish is making sure that you've got all your tasks properly scheduled. And good practice management stems from having a complete task list. And it's not just making sure that all the tasks are actually scheduled, it's making sure that they're scheduled and set up in the best way possible so that you're getting a maximum return out of it, that clients are getting notified, that you have the right documents set up, that the different dates are set up correctly and all that type of stuff. Okay, so I'm going to spend a fair bit of time going over this in detail, really to explain, again, why we set things up the way we did, what different things in our program mean, and what the result is in terms of how the program operates going forward. Because once you set it up, the entire intent is that ClientTrack does everything for you. When you tell ClientTrack all the tasks, it will automatically notify your staff. It'll tell them what documents you need them to bring in. It'll track different things. It'll do a lot of actions automatically based on how you set things up so that you don't have to spend the time to do all this manually. Okay, so let's just start very quickly here. So again, we're on our client here, new workshop client. And what we want to do is we want to start scheduling the standard tasks that we do. So we're going to start with the HST. Now, there's a few things that we want to make sure that we are set up with the client in terms of their information. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to fiscal year end, and I'm going to indicate what the client's year end date is. So if I click on the month, it allows me to quickly select a month. So I'm going to click October, and I'm going to choose October 31st. So I've specifically said that this client's year end is October 31st. Now, the year itself doesn't actually matter. ClientTrack doesn't care if the year in this particular field is 2018, 2017, or 2014. Really, all it's concerned about here is the month and the day. It just needs to know when the client's fiscal is. If we go back to HST, the second thing I want to make sure I set up right away is the company type. So I'm going to set this to a corporation, which is probably the most common company type. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to type in a business number in terms of the information. So now this is just a raw business number, so I'm not going to add any RT, RP, or RC part after this. This is just a raw business number. So if I go back to HST, you can see that it filled in the business number automatically for me and added the RT001. Now, if I need to, for the rare case, if it's actually RT002, I can just change the 1 to a 2. And I can indicate, yes, we are registered with CRA for GST HST. And I can indicate what kind of filing method we do. We do the traditional, simply quick method, so on and so forth. All right. Now, in terms of the tasks, when it comes to the built-in remittances that we built in, where we built in the provincial and the federal dates, all I have to do is tell it the filing period. So in this case, I can say that the filing period for this particular client is a quarterly basis. So I'm going to choose quarterly as the filing period. And a message pops up and it says ClientTrack has determined that the first quarter HST payment should be due in February based on your year-end month. Now, I want to clarify this. This is due. So this is the date that is due to CRA. So this is what we call the due date, which is the filing date. This is not the period end date. Okay, so, and we need to differentiate because those obviously represent completely different dates. Okay, so the next question below that is says, click yes to use February as your start month, or click no to use January, which is the start month you have over here. So I'm going to say yes. Okay, and we're going to come back and I'm going to show you what this is in a second, so we're going to ignore that. All right, so there is my GST quarterly filing dates. So the due date to CRA is February 28th for the first quarter, and the period end therefore represents January. So we're very clear on when the period ends versus when the actual filing date to CRA. The filing date is the more important date from your point of view because this is when you have to get your work done. Okay, so that's why we call it the due date. All right, and you can see that the first 2 tasks have automatically had the close check mark checked, and that's because those 2 filing dates have come and gone, so they're already in the past. Now, in terms of how ClientTrack schedules things, ClientTrack always schedules things from the point of view of the calendar year. So it schedules all the tasks between January 1st and December 31st and then stops. So you have all 4 tasks here. Now, if I had scheduled this and said, oh, well, okay, right now I don't need February and May because I've already completed them, so I'm only going to schedule March and November and delete the first 2, that's fine for this year. But one of the advantages of ClientTrack is it rolls forward the tasks each year. So it takes what you've scheduled last year and it reschedules those same tasks next year so that you've got them and you don't have to worry about scheduling tasks even year to year. So it's important to leave all 4, because if I had deleted February and May and only left August and November, which are the only 2 I have to do this year, when the task gets created next year, I'm only going to end up with August and November as well. So I need February and May there, and I'm just going to mark them off as already completed so that when the task gets scheduled next year, all 4 of them get appear properly. Okay, so, and that concept holds true for virtually everything else in ClientTrack. If you're scheduling monthly items, always start your monthly scheduling from January to December, even if you've already completed many of your months, so that when we schedule the task next year automatically through our program, all 12 tasks get scheduled and you're not missing a series of tasks that you might have deleted because you completed them this year. All right, so, and let's deal with a scenario here because this often comes up and people are going to have questions about this. On the HST side, we've set this up so that the filing period end and due dates corresponds directly to the fact that they have an October 31st year end. But there are going to be times where that may not be the case. So I'm going to override this and say, okay, the filing date does not correspond to their fiscal year, and the due date for their first quarter is actually due in March. So I'm going to choose March as our quarter. And I'm going to reselect quarterly, and once again I get this message. So it's saying, hey, we've determined that the HST filing date should theoretically be due in February. And you say click yes to use February, which is the date the system feels it should be. And it says, or click no to use March, which is the start month from the drop-down list. So we've changed the drop-down list to March. So it's asking us, do you want us to use the default of February, or do you want to use the date that you've specifically identified in the drop-down? And we're going to say, okay, we want to use the one over in the drop-down. So therefore, we want to answer the question, we want to click no. And we're going to say yes to replace the current set of tasks. And we're going to ignore this. Again, I'm going to come back to what that is in a second. And you can see that the dates have now changed. So the first quarter is due in March, and then we have June, September, and December. Okay, and it's closed off the one task that has been passed to. All right, so that's how you can do that. If you want to change it to monthly, all you do is select monthly and say yes, and you have your 12 monthly items. Okay, so there's your 12 monthly tasks there. All right, so and once again, it's closed off all the tasks that's been completed. Now let's say that you actually haven't got the May one completed, that's still outstanding. You can just go here and you can uncheck this task and just say yes, and then it'll uncheck there. Okay. All right, so and then so let's go across some of the tabs and we'll get this done quickly. So for PST, if you have to file PST in any other provinces, or you are in a province where PST is still applicable, you can put your PST number and you can indicate monthly, quarterly, twice annual, so on and so forth. Payroll source deduction, so this is a common one. So we're going to click the check mark to say payroll is registered. So it automatically takes that business number from the home screen and it puts it in here and adds the RP001. And then we can check off what we do. So we say we do a T4 for the client, we do a T5, and then we can say that they pay monthly source deduction. So we're going to choose monthly. And there is our source deductions. Okay, so you can see that there's the T5 return, here's the T4 in summary, and there's our 12 monthly items. And it's checked off all the tasks that are completed. So ClientTrack makes it very, very easy to schedule all the tasks for Canadian accounting professionals because we have much of the stuff built in for you. Under payroll, this is where you would do your paycheck service. So the previous one was your T4s and your source deductions. The payroll is if you actually do a paycheck. So we're going to say, okay, the last payroll Friday was, say, the 15th, and we're going to choose biweekly. Now, in the case of weekly and biweekly, this is the exception to the rule. I explained before that you always need to schedule tasks from January to December. The one exception to the rule is when you're doing weekly and biweekly. So for weekly and biweekly, we can actually start where the task left off. So I'm going to choose biweekly, and we're going to ignore this. So it started at the last payroll, which has been completed for June 15th, and it has scheduled a sequential payroll every Friday 2 weeks until the end of the year. In the case of weekly and bi-weekly, when we run that New Year wizard and schedule all the tasks for next year, for 2019, it will continue this pattern, and it will continue the second Friday pattern all the way from January to December. Okay, so the weekly and bi-weekly is the exception to the rule where you do not need to start the task all the way from January of this year. All right, so fiscal year end and corporate tax. Okay, so we want to explain what this is because this is really important for how ClientTrack works, particularly when we get into the project management that we're going to be talking about tomorrow's session. So the idea here is I've already told ClientTrack specifically that this client has an October 31st year end. And I'm going to click this check mark and it says create year-end task. All right, so it's created a task here called fiscal year-end, and in brackets contact client to start year-end return. Okay, you can see that the task due date is October 31st, and the period end is also October 31st. October 31st is actually the client's fiscal year-end. Now, the knee-jerk reaction for accounting professionals is to say, hey, no, that's wrong. The due date that I'm worried about is the one where the corporate tax is due in 3 months. And we're like, absolutely. So you're going to go to corporate tax, and you schedule the corporate tax return and corporate tax payment tasks. So these are additional tasks. So the corporate tax payment officially is due 3 months after the year end, and the return is due 6 months after the year end. Okay, now a lot of accounting professionals don't worry about the 6-month deadline. They just get the whole thing done by the 3-month one. So if you don't need the second one, you can just remove that. So there is the deadline that you're worried about. So the April 30th is when you have to get the corporate task completed by. But that brings us back to this task. Well, why do we have this task? This task is really, really important because what ends up happening is when the client's fiscal year end ends, you need to contact the client right away and say, hey, congratulations on another successful year. Your corporate tax is now due in 3 months. So we need you to come into our office right now on your fiscal year end so that we can start the process. You give us the information, and we have 3 months to get the corporate tax done, which gives us enough time. Because if you miss this reminder and October 31st comes and goes, and suddenly you open ClientTrack and say, hey, what do I have to do at the end of the month? And ClientTrack says, hey, by the way, congratulations, you have to get this corporate tax done by the end of April. So let's say it's April 1st, and you're saying, okay, these are all the tasks I have to get done. And for the first time, you see that you have that April 30th task. So you say, well, that's too late. I was supposed to be aware of this corporate tax return 3 months ago so that I could start it and get it done. So that's why we created this task here. So think of it like a friendly hand wave. Think of it as a way to say, okay, hey, just a friendly notification. This particular client's fiscal year end just ended. You need to contact them now to start the process to make sure that you can get everything done so you can meet the secondary deadline date of April 30th. Okay, and that's why we're very specific about the task name. It says fiscal year end, contact client to start year end return. Okay, all right, so that's how that works. Okay, so moving on, so we have WSIB. Now, again, it's called WSIB because I've told ClientTrack that I'm based in Ontario. We changed the terminology to WCB for most of the other provinces. It's just a terminology thing, but it's the same thing. So you can put the firm number, WSIB number. You can put the premium rate coverage. Do they have casual wages, subcontractors? and you say that they file on a quarterly basis. You choose quarterly, and we create the returns there. Okay, EHT is a tax that applies to, I believe, Ontario and Saskatchewan. It effectively is employer's health tax, and it applies to companies, I believe, that have over $1 million in payroll revenue. They have an additional tax applied. So if you have clients where that tax is applicable, you'd be able to schedule the EHT. Under other, this is where we have other stuff. So we have things like international fuel tax. So it's a quarterly, it's called IFTA. And we have the dates there, T5018 contract reporter, agri-stability, consumer and commercial relations, all that type of stuff is there. So you have the ability to quickly schedule stuff. All right, so that brings us to custom. Okay, now custom and bookkeeping work the same way, so I'm going to show you how that applies. So the idea is that we built in all the tasks for the federal and provincial deadline dates. But there's going to be many, many other tasks that you need to schedule either upfront as a regular recurring item, or on the fly because the client calls you up and say, hey, I need you to do this quick job for me. So let's take two scenarios. So we've got our new client here, workshop client. And let's say that client calls us up and says, hey, I'm just set up a meeting with my banker for next Wednesday. I'm trying to apply for a small business loan to buy some more manufacturing equipment. And the banker says that I need to bring with me my last 3 years of printed financials. So the client is effectively asking you to print and prepare the last 3 years of financials so the client can pick them up and take them to the banking meeting. So we just want to create a one-off random task reminding us to get that done in time for the meeting. So we're going to choose the option Add New Service. And the window pops up and we are going to put in a task name. So I was going to call this a Print Financials. Okay, and I'm going to give this a due date. So the client is meeting with the banker next Wednesday, which is June 27th. And so we're going to say, okay, we need to get this done the day before. So we're going to get this done on June 26th. So we drop this down and I'm going to assign this to a person. So I'm going to say, okay, David's going to work on this. And I'm going to leave this as a custom task. Now, I could allocate this to another category. So I could say it's an HST task or a year-end related task. The purpose of, and the reason I would do that is by doing that, I can classify this task as an HST. So in a moment when I show you the task list, I can specifically say, okay, show me all HST tasks I need to do. So in addition to the monthly and quarterly HST tasks we built in, it will show this particular task as part of that group of tasks because it is classified as an HST as well. All right, but we're going to just change this to a custom. All right, and every task has what we call an estimated completion time. So ClientTrack gives you the ability to budget future workload to see how much work you physically have on your calendar next month. So you can see whether you have the ability to take on more work or if you're already overloaded with your existing workload. And the way we make that determination is based on what we call the estimated completion time. So you know by past experience that by the time you dig up all the PDF files, you print them off, you staple them, and do all that kind of stuff, it usually takes you, let's say an hour to do this. Let's knock this down to 30 minutes. So I'm going to change this to 30 minutes. So you're basically just telling ClientTrack how long you think this task is going to take, just so that ClientTrack can give you a rough idea of how much work you have on your schedule. And then the next question is important. It says, do you want to recur this task each year? Okay. So we're going to check this off, or sorry, we're going to uncheck it. So a moment ago, I was explaining how ClientTrack will automatically recur the task each year. So once you schedule, for example, quarterly HST and your payrolls and source deductions and T-slips and all that kind of stuff, those tasks get scheduled again for 2019 and then 2020 and so on and so forth. But this particular task is a one-off thing. This print financials, it's just a task we want to do once. We don't want this task to be part of that roll forward process. So I'm going to uncheck this option, and it just removes this task. So I will not get a task called print financials due on June 26, 2019. ClientTrack recognizes that this is just a one-off task for this year. All right, and I'm going to schedule that. And now I have very simply a task for print financials. It's assigned to David with the due date of next week on June 26th. All right, so that's one scenario. Now, excuse me, let's take another scenario. So let's say that you want to schedule a recurring task in exactly the same way that quarterly HST works and that kind of thing, but it's something that you do as a proprietary service within your particular office. So let's say that you provide a service where every month you have a meeting, a phone meeting with your client, and you go over and you tell the client from a professional accounting point of view how their business is doing. So explain to them what the cash flow numbers are, what their profit and loss is. You tell them if their business is growing, if their expenses are increasing, what their bottom line is, all that type of stuff. So, and it's a professional consulting service that your clients charge you for. So you want to schedule that as a regular recurring task. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose that as add new service, a recurring task. So we're going to choose this second toggle. So, excuse me, previously we had scheduled the new service single task. We're going to schedule the recurring one. So this just allows us to schedule something that happens over a period of a year, not just once. So we're going to call this P&L profit and loss consulting. Okay, we're going to leave this as a custom. So once again, I could allocate this to a specific existing category, but it really doesn't follow in any one of these. So I'm just going to choose this as custom, and I am going to choose monthly because it could be, say, a quarterly task, it could be a weekly task, or it could be monthly. So I'm going to choose monthly, and this is going to occur each month. So if this were, say, a bi-monthly, it just means it's monthly and it recurs every second month. Okay, so in this case we want every month, and I'm going to say okay to start month of January. So again, this comes back to the concept, you always want to think of tasks starting from January to December, with the exception of weekly or bi-weekly, because if I was to schedule this for June and schedule from June to December, ClientTrack is going to assume that the tasks only exist in June to December, which means when we schedule these tasks next year for 2019, I will only get June to December. Okay, so we want to be more specific than that. We want to say, okay, it starts in January. I want to try and complete this task by the 20th of each month. Okay, and I'm going to assign this task to David by default, and this task is going to take me an hour and 30 minutes. So it's going to take me, say, an hour of prep time to put the information together, print off a report and get everything ready, and then the remaining 30 minutes will be the actual phone call to the client. So the entire prep time and the phone call itself for this consulting profit and loss item will take up an hour and a half of my time each of the months. Then the question below that is, do you want to recur this task each year? And in this case, the answer is yes. So we're telling ClientTrack to include this profit and loss consulting job as a recurring item. So when all the items get recurred next year, this will get included, and I will get the 12 profit and loss scheduled next year. So we're going to click the green Add Task button here. All right, so now I have my 12 profit and loss consulting with the due dates January, February, March, April, May. And I'm going to save this. So I'm going to use the same text here. Okay, so what saving means is instead of me having to come in here and set up all these parameters every single time I want to create a profit and loss for a client, I can just save this profit and loss item. Okay. So I'm going to click Save, and I'm going to click OK. And then I'm going to click this button at the bottom that says Schedule Custom Tasks for this company. So the company we are focused on right now is new workshop client. So I'm going to click here. Okay, so there is our profit and loss, and then there's the one print financials that we have to get done by June 26. Okay, so there's a due date January, February, March, April. On the 20th, it's all assigned to David, and ClientTrack is, for my convenience, already closed off the tasks that happened before June, just to mark off that these ones have already been done. Okay, if I realize, well, I still have to get the May one done, I can go back and I can undo that particular task. All right, so that's how we schedule the profit and loss. Okay, now let's go back to the bookkeeping. Okay, so the bookkeeping works conceptually exactly the same way as custom. So you can see here I already have some examples here. I have monthly bookkeeping account recs, monthly bookkeeping data entry, monthly bookkeeping verify. Okay, so I'm actually going to delete these. So we're going to go custom services, we're going to go manage existing, and I'm just going to delete these 3 services here, because I just want to start from scratch and I want to show you something. Okay, so when you set up your bookkeeping, you want to set them up from the point of view of the frequency. So you want to say that all right, for some clients, I do bookkeeping on an annual basis because we do it as part of their year-end process, for example. Other clients, we do it on a quarterly basis, yet other clients, we do it on a monthly basis. So those would be the common frequencies. So I'm going to go add new bookkeeping service, and we're just going to call this annual bookkeeping. Okay, and I'm going to choose this as annual, and we're going to add the task, and I'm just going to save this. I'm not going to worry about going through the details. I've already shown you this, and go save. Okay, so I've saved it, and I'm going to go cancel. So the annual bookkeeping, you can see that I spelled it wrong. I added a Q in there, but that's okay. Is there, but because I didn't schedule for this client, it didn't get scheduled, but it's there in my inventory. So just like custom, there's my profit and loss as a saved item, and I can pick that and apply that to any other client. So I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so we have annual bookkeeping. Let's add another one real quick here. We'll call this monthly bookkeeping. Okay, and we're going to call this monthly. We're going to add the tasks. Copy the item. We're going to save it. Okay, so now I created annual and monthly. All right, now let's say with our new client, our workshop client, I want to schedule monthly bookkeeping. So I'm going to click the button here, assign selected service, meaning the one I've highlighted, monthly bookkeeping, to the client. So I click here, and I have 2 options. I can use the service as they're saved here, which gives me exactly the due date. Or I can change it up a little bit. I can say, okay, when we saved monthly bookkeeping, we said that we want it to be due on the 15th, but for this client, I want the due date, the date that we have to get this done by the 20th of the month. Okay, and I'm going to assign this to David, and it usually takes me 2 hours and say 20 minutes to get the bookkeeping done each month, and we're going to go okay. So now I've set up the monthly bookkeeping there. Okay, so and that's how I set up the bookkeeping. Now what we're going to talk about is, now that I've set up the raw tasks, I want to now set up my assembly line. Okay, so we've set up all the raw tasks to tell us the things that we need to do and by when. But what we now need to do with each of these tasks that we've scheduled, the HST, the custom, the bookkeeping, the payroll, all that stuff, is we're going to think about what happens before that. So before we have to get the task done, we want to notify the client. We want to let the client know what documents we need from that client for that particular job. We want to tell the client by when we need the information in. Remember I was telling you about the info deadline date? So we're going to tell the client, in this case here, we want to try and get the bookkeeping done by the 20th of the month. but that means that we need to tell the client that we need the information by the 15th, so the client's going to bring us information so that we can actually complete it on the 20th. Okay, so you can see how we're building up an assembly line. There's other things that we need to happen before we get to this. So that's where it comes to, so if we go to Tools and I go to Edit Task Options Wizard, okay, it brings up this wizard. Now I'm going to close it. I'm going to show you another way. So see this little button right here? Okay, so if I click this, it gives me the same thing, Edit Task Options Wizard. So what we're doing with this is we're effectively setting up that process, that assembly line that needs to happen so that we can communicate effectively with the clients through ClientTrack. Okay, so you can see that we can set up the assembly line for each of the different tasks. So all the tasks are built in. So let's do the monthly bookkeeping one. So I'm going to choose monthly bookkeeping, which is the item we just created. So the first thing I can set up is the name of the task, and it's just called monthly bookkeeping, which is fine. Then what I can also do is I can set up the initial estimated time. Now, with the monthly bookkeeping, I think I said that I wanted it to be 2 hours and 20 minutes. All right. So we're telling ClientTrack that when we schedule monthly bookkeeping for any clients, we're setting the default for 2 hours and 20 minutes. And everything that I'm doing here, I want to specify, it's not client specific. So this is global settings. So these are going to be applied regardless of who the client is. But we can change the settings and we can tweak them when we schedule for a specific client. We're just sort of setting up the defaults. Now the next option here is called Portal Client Visibility, and this is all part of the new step we built into ClientTrack. So what I'm going to show you towards the end of this demo is how our online portal works. Now, with the portal, you can log into the portal and you can see, and when I say portal, I mean a browser base. So you open up your internet browser, you go to a login screen just like you do for your banking, you type a username, password, and you get to log in. Now, with the portal, you can log in and you can see all the tasks and all that stuff. And the whole reason you would want to do that is with the desktop version, you can only access the desktop generally if you're sitting at your office. But if you want to look up a client information or a telephone number or see what you're working on or see what the missing information is, you can log into the portal from any computer anywhere in the world through the browser and see the information. Now, it gives you a lot of other functionality. We have secure file sharing. You can share files with other people. We have file storage, and the clients can log in. So there's more than just that. But one of the other features is the clients can log in if you authorize them to do so. And your clients can log in to the ClientTrack portal, and your client will see what tasks you're working on and what documents you need from them, which is the process I'm going to show you right now. So this visibility option is telling you that by default, you want the monthly bookkeeping task to be visible to the clients if they log in. And the reason why is we have the option is, you know how just a moment ago I created a task to remind me to print the financial statements? Well, if the client logs into the portal to see what you're working on, you probably don't want the client to see that random task. That task was just created by you so you wouldn't forget it. So you would be able to remove the visibility so that when the client logs in, they can't see the print financials task. But you do want the client to be able to see that you're working on the monthly bookkeeping because you want them to see what documents you need from them. Okay, so this is all going to come together in a moment. All right, so let's go to the second tab here. So this is called internal date notification. So again, we're looking at editing think of it like an assembly line for the monthly bookkeeping. So the first thing we have is with the internal dates, we have something called an in-house due date. All right, so I've already shown you when you schedule the tasks, all clients have an actual due date. And that's the date the tasks must be submitted to, for example, CRA, to filing date. But as accounting professionals, we often have to get the task done before the due date. So in a case of HST, you have to get the HST completed and figure out how much needs to be remitted, let's say, for example, 3 days prior to the filing date, because you need to be able to send an email, call the client and say, hey, we figured out your HST numbers, you need to send a remittance of $5,000 to CRA. But if you tell the client that information on the day it's due, the client will say, well, that's too late because I need 2 banking days to set up the payment to make sure CRA gets it in their hands on time. So that means you need to go to the client 3 days before the real filing date with the information they need so that they can make the banking payment on time. So that's why we refer to it as an in-house due date. And that concept applies to basically all tasks in the accounting world. Is usually for most tasks, a T-slip, you want to get it done several days prior to the real filing date so that you can go to the client and say, hey, we got it done, here's the amount. You need to do the last step of filing it and sending the money in and doing the banking and so on and so forth. Okay, the calendar date represents the day that this task is going to sit on your calendar that you would sort of effectively work on it. Excuse me. So the calendar date says, okay, 10 days before the filing date, you're actually going to work on this task. You're going to sit down and you're going to get it done so that for sure it's done by the in-house due date. Now, obviously, the calendar date is going to be a floating date, and you can adjust it. And if you miss, 10 days, you can work on it 8 days before and that kind of thing. But it's sort of a rough way to place it on the calendar so that you can make sure that your information is spread all over your calendar so that you have the ability to get everything done so that you meet all tasks by the in-house due date. Okay, then we get to the client dates. So again, we want to think of an assembly line. So when we talk about the client dates, there's 2 relevant dates. There's what we call the info deadline date and the client notification date. So if we look at the process, the first thing that happens with the task is the client's going to get an email from us saying, hey, don't forget, in 30 days your bookkeeping is due. I need your information by the info deadline date so that we can get the task done by effectively our in-house due date. Okay, so we're telling the system that we want to send an email to the client 25 days prior to the filing date to remind the client, hey, your task is coming due, this is the information we need, and we're telling the client in that email that we need the information by a date, which is 15 days prior to the due date. Okay. All right, so now we get into what we call the client documents and instructions and then the internal. Okay, and this is brand new in ClientTrack, so most of you have never seen this before. So if you haven't downloaded our latest version, make sure you do that now and you'll get this new feature. So the concept is that when we go to the client and we say, hey, your bookkeeping is due at the end of the month, we need your information, you now have the ability to indicate exactly from the client what it is that you need. Now, what we're doing right now, and just bear with me because I'm going to explain the whole process and everything will become clear. We're setting up a default list that's not client specific of the types of things that we need to do the monthly bookkeeping. So I'm going to go add new item and I'm going to add 3 items here. Now the item can be either an instruction to the client on what they need to do, or it can be a document. So let's start with an instruction. So let's say that many of our clients, not all, but some of our clients use PayPal and Eventbrite and all kinds of other online transaction systems. So we need a list of transactions from those online accounts in addition to the credit card and bank statements so that we can reconcile them and figure out the total tax applied and so on and so forth. So I'm going to do an instruction and we're going to say log in to PayPal. Okay, and then the next instruction will be export monthly report from PayPal. All right, now the third one is actually going to be a document. So once the client follows those first 2 instructions, the third is going to be a document, and the document is going to be PayPal CSV export. All right, and then we also need credit card statements. So I'm going to request document. We're going to call credit card statements. And again, a document, we're going to go bank statements. All right, and the last thing is just, again, this will be documents, but this will be, let's say, invoices and receipts. Okay, now this is a generic list. This is not client specific. This is the types of things that generally we need from most of our clients. I have the option later to narrow this down on a client specific basis to indicate exactly what it is that we really need. Okay, now what I can do is we're setting up monthly bookkeeping, but the list of things that we need for annual bookkeeping is pretty much the same, but I don't want to have to retype that whole list. So I'm going to go back to monthly bookkeeping, and I'm going to go, we're going to go copy item list, and I'm going to go to annual, and all I have to do is go paste item list, and it repeats the list for this other thing because it's basically the same. Okay, so it's just a nice copy paste thing, so I don't have to retype the lists of items. So I'm now back at monthly bookkeeping, and we're going to go internal. Okay, so the first list is the stuff that the client needs to do in order to give us a task. The second list is once the client gives us the information, we now have an internal process that we have to do to complete the task. Okay, so it's two different things. The first is the instructions for the client. The second internal is the instructions for us to do it. Now, the reason we added this in is more and more, a lot of offices are realizing the value of outsourcing work, and a lot of employees prefer to work from home and be able to be more efficient. They don't have to travel and go into work and all that kind of stuff. They just quickly get their work done from home. Now, what this means is it means that you, as the owner and person setting this up, can create a very detailed list of what a bookkeeper or accounting professional needs to do to get this task done. Because you want a person not to forget any steps, even if they've done this type of task for this client before, and B, if that person is not available and you have to allocate this monthly bookkeeping to a different person outsourcing who's never worked on the bookkeeping for this client, you want that person to have access to an exact list of all the things that they need to do so that you don't have to train them. They don't miss anything, and everything becomes much more seamless because everybody can see a very well, clearly documented procedures and process and how they get the task bookkeeping done. Okay, so again, the bookkeeping that we're adding in at this point in the program is a generic overall list that's not client specific. Okay, we are going to have the ability in a moment to do the client specific. So just bear with me and watch the process. So we're going to create a global generic list. So I'm going to add a couple items, and the first thing I'm going to say is an instruction. So it's going to be sort receipts in date order. Okay, so the next one is match receipts to statements. Okay, so then the next thing will be reconcile. So I'll just say rec credit card. And then we're going to reconcile bank statements. So I'm going to go rec okay, and then I'm just going to say finalize, right? So it might be a double check process to make sure it's done. Okay, so generically, that's the kind of thing that we need to do every time we do monthly bookkeeping. So you can see how the lists are different. The client list is what we need the client to do to give us the information and the specific documents. The internal list is what we need to do to complete it after the client has brought the stuff in. All right, so now we're going to close it, but let's just review what we've done. So we've set up the task name. We've told ClientTrack by default roughly how long the task should last, and we've indicated that the client can see this if they log in through the portal. We've set the in-house due date period to 3 days, so we have to get this done 3 days before the filing date. We plan to allocate this on the calendar and physically work on it 10 days before the filing date. the client will have to give us the information 15 days before the filing date, but they are going to get an email 25 days before the filing date to tell them the list of documents that they need and the deadline date. All right, here's the list of documents. Okay, so now we're going to go close. So I'm going to delete our existing bookkeeping that we set up, and I'm going to schedule brand new ones. So we're going to go Manage Tasks. I'm going to go Select All, and I'm going to go Delete, and I'm going to go Close. Okay, we're going to do this over again. So I'm going to click Monthly Bookkeeping, and I'm going to go Assign Selected Service to this client. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the defaults. So well, I'll just keep it the same. So we'll go OK. Now, this is the screen that I kept skipping over before, but now we're going to pay attention to it. So what it's done is we are now scheduling monthly bookkeeping specifically for this client, new workshop client. Okay, it brings up our default list, our global list that we had set up. And we can look at this and say, okay, well, this particular client does not have PayPal. So we're going to delete these instructions because the PayPal instructions don't actually apply to them. Okay, with the credit card, they actually have 3 credit cards. So we're going to be very specific. They have a Visa card statement, and I'm going to put the last 4 numbers of the Visa. I'm going to add a new one, and I'm going to say that this is a document. And I'm going to say that this is a MasterCard statement ending in a different number, and I can say that they actually have a 3rd card and they have an Amex with card ending in this, and they could have 2 or 3 Visas, MasterCards, all that type of stuff. Okay, so and I'm going to move these higher up in our list, so I'm just going to change the order here. Now with bank statements, they have 2 bank accounts. They have a TD bank account and a CIBC. We need statements for both, so I'm going to change this one to TD business account, and I'll put the account number there. I'm going to add a new item, and we're going to change this to a document, and I'm going to call this one, for example, CIBC, and we'll call this CIBC savings account. Okay, so every single piece of paper I need from this client, I'm going to add to this list. Okay, so now let's say that they don't have PayPal, but they do use Eventbrite because they schedule a lot of different events for their clients and that kind of thing. So in addition to the invoice and receipts, I also need them to log into Eventbrite every month and download a CSV for me. So I'm going to add that in. So I'm going to add new instruction. So I'm going to say log in to Eventbrite. Okay, and I'm going to tell them that they need to export monthly transactions. All right, and then ultimately they follow those 2 instructions, but they have to give us the document, which is the Eventbrite CSV export file, which is the export file of the monthly transactions. Okay, so they can see the client whether it's a document or an instruction. So we've been very, very detailed here. All right. Then we look at the internal process. So that's what the client needs to do. Now we look at what we need to do. Okay, so this list is actually pretty good. Sort receipts in date order, match receipts to statement, reconcile credit card, bank statements. Now, I want to expand on this, but for the sake of training, I don't want to go through and edit all these. But what I'm going to do in this list here is I'm going to do the same list. Actually, I'm going to go copy list, and I'm going to go over here. And I'm going to go paste list. Okay, so I'm going to remove so I'm just modifying this. So I'm going to say reconcile Visa statement, reconcile MasterCard statement, reconcile Amex. The more detailed you are here, because you only have to do this once. So the process of what I'm doing is setting this up. I only have to do this once. Once I've set this up, if I set up monthly bookkeeping, this list is going to be replicated 12 times. And when this task gets scheduled next year, it's also going to be replicated 12 times. So I'm only setting up the list of documents once. And it has a lot of power because you're preventing internal errors when they miss things, or if you need somebody to work on and do the bookkeeping that's never worked in bookkeeping for this client, they have an exact list of all the stuff they're expecting. Okay, so it allows your business to be much more transferable in terms of who's working on the job, and you can easily give jobs to other people and that sort of thing. Okay, so you get the idea. Okay, so I'm going to delete the Okay, so that's good enough. So for an internal list, we now have to sort receipts, match receipts to statement. We have to reconcile the Visa, the MasterCard, Amex, the CIBC, and the TD, and then we finalize the whole job. All right, so we've now been very specific on what the client needs to do and then what we need to do, and we now go close. So 12 tasks are now being created. The difference is that every single one of these monthly bookkeeping has that list. So if I click on any one of these, I'm going to click on this one, and we go to client document instructions. There is a list of all the stuff that we're doing. So two things can happen from here. If the client prefers to drop off their paperwork in the old-fashioned way, they walk in the door, they put the paperwork on their front desk. Whoever receives that paperwork, let's say as an office manager, and the office manager does not specialize in accounting and bookkeeping, so he or she does not actually do the accounting and bookkeeping, and they're obviously not aware in their head what they're expecting from that client. But they can now see this list. So they come in here and say, hey, Sam, it was really good to see you walk in. Let me check to see, while you're standing in front of me, whether you've given us everything we're expecting. So you can see here that we have a built-in new field here called Received All Docs. All right, so Sam has just walked in the office, and the office manager has pulled up this task for the June item and said, okay, let's take a look at what you've got. And said, okay, yeah, I can see that you have the Visa card. You brought us the MasterCard statement, the Amex, the CIBC. We have the TD Business. We have invoices. And yes, you have given us the Eventbrite CSV file. Okay, and I'm going to check off the two instructions. Now, watch what happens. So if I go to here, you see that the Received All Documents is not checked. The moment we check all of these items, the Received All Documents gets checked and it gets date stamped. So today is June 19th. So ClientTrack has just told me that on June 19th, we have received the last document and instruction that we need. Okay, so this list has been fulfilled. So you've now given the power of that person who meets the client at the front door to vet what the client has brought in, and you're eliminating finding missing information after the fact. So that person could have said to Sam, hey, thank you for bringing the stuff in, but I noticed compared to the list here, you forgot the MasterCard. Do you mind running back, getting that now so that we have that so we can get your job done? Okay. Now, the neat thing is this list of documents is also available through our portal automatically without you having to do anything. So let's say that the client logged into the portal this evening. They would see this list of documents, and if they were so inclined and they like doing that, they can drag and drop and give you the digital files that you need. So they could scan all the bank statements and give you all the stuff and do it through the portal. So they do it manually. And when they give you all the documents, once again, this check mark on the desktop automatically gets checked based on the action that the client did all by themselves, online. So you could come in tomorrow morning and ClientTrack will say, hey, by the way, last night after you went home, 10 clients just gave you the last of the information you need to complete their jobs. So you have 10 more tasks in your office that you can work on now because the client has fulfilled it. And see, what's also happening here is we were telling the client that we needed the information by April 30th. but we received it on June 19th. So we can see very clearly when we were hoping to get it from the client and when we ultimately did. And ClientTrack is telling you that yes, you received it, but you received it late. So you can see at a glance whether the client fulfilled it. So this is another really, really important thing, because it's all about being able to have a good working relationship with your clients. If your clients have trained themselves and know that they can bring their information later and later and later, and they can bring all their information at the last minute, several days before the HST or the bookkeeping's due, and you're going to take the information, you're going to get it done, then the client's going to know that. They're going to abuse the system if they know that they can get away with it, and you end up with a whole bunch of clients that bring their stuff in at the last minute, and it's stressful, it's tiresome, you're working long hours, and I mean, it's no good for anyone. But the clients, unless the clients have an actual deadline to work against, they're just going to keep bringing it in later and later and later. So the info deadline date is now a very, very clear and definable date that you've made it clear to the client. Say, look, we need your information by this date. And you can use this as a great interaction tool with the clients. So you can use this as a way to say, okay, we're going to create a client relationship where we sign a contract, and the contract stipulates that we're going to send you an email. And of course, from your point of view, the email gets created automatically by ClientTrack, and I'll show you that in a moment. But the contract will say, we're going to send you an email, and the email will tell you when the task is due, what information we need from you, and it'll give you a deadline date. And the contract will say, if you meet that deadline date consistently over the year, when we reevaluate your contract on an annual basis, then we will keep the rates the same. But the contract can say, if you miss the deadline date more than 3 times over the course of the year for your deadlines, then we're going to raise your rates by, say, $5 an hour next year. So you're giving the clients an incentive to bring the information on time. So you can't ask them to do something unless you have an actual date. So now we're giving you that date that they actually can look at, and it's a discrete date that they have to get their stuff in by, but it's now trackable, because for every single task, whether they gave you the files all by themselves online through the portal, or whether they walked in their front door and gave you the files, you can now track when that last document was given to you, and we will tell you whether they were on time or whether they were late. Okay, so you can use that as a tool and say, look, you know, we love your business, but you missed a deadline 7 times last year, and according to the contract, we're going to raise your rates. So we have 2 options we can present to you. You know, we can keep the rates the same if you promise next year to bring them in on time, or you can look at raising the rates and that kind of thing. You can even give them an incentive where you can say, hey, if you bring it in on time every single time, we're going to lower your rate as a thank you for doing that. Okay, so you get the idea of what I'm saying. All right, so and then with the internal dates, you would then be able to check off which ones you've done. So if you've done a few of these, then you can come back and you can say, okay, I still have to do these other things. So it's a way of tracking what's been done and what hasn't before you ultimately complete the job, and you click the close check mark to say the job is completely done. All right, so that's how that system works. So let's talk about the automatic email. I brought that up a few times, and then we're going to go for a break. So I'm going to bring up another client here. Okay, so we have a client here, DM Auto Body Shop, and I'm just bringing it up because I've already set it up before the demo. So you can see that I've set up automatic notifications. So this notify check mark. So the first check mark indicates the task is closed. The second one tells me that there's an automatic email scheduled to go out to the client. So if I click that option, I can edit and can see the email. So this is a case of what the email is going to look like. So it's saying that the email is going to go to the client on July 27th, and it's saying, hey, your monthly HST return is due on Friday, August 31st. Okay. So the email goes out just before the year-end, the period ends for that particular monthly HST return. And then it says, please arrange to submit to us all of our paperwork that we need to allow us to complete the return. The following is a list of what we need from you. So you can see that in the email is the exact list of documents. So Visa statement ending in MasterCard, TD bank account, log into PayPal, submit to us the PayPal transaction CSV export. Okay. And then below that, you can say this represents all paperwork in the period of July 1st to July 31st, for example. And then below that, it says, please submit to us all the required documents we need by August 21st, 2018. So that represents the info deadline date for this particular task. Okay, so the email gets sent to the client on January 27th to remind the client of the task that ultimately is due August 31st to CRA. It gives them a list of exactly what documents you need, and it gives them the info deadline date and says, we need your stuff by August 21st as per our agreement to make sure that we can get your return completed in a timely manner. Okay, and then you can have a nice, you can call our office if you need any assistance or have any questions. All right, so that's a really good example. And even better is when you enable the client to log into the portal. And we're going to talk about that. And that's an optional thing. So you have the ability to choose which and when clients can log into the portal. And we'll talk about that. But when you enable that, another sentence appears below this. And it says, please feel free to log in. And it gives them the URL to log in at any time to upload the documents yourself. So there'll be a sentence within the email to remind them that they can log into the portal, and then gives them the actual link to log in to write in the email as well. So that can get added in as well. Okay, so that's an example of how that works. So the way you set up the email, and I'm going to show you that really quickly, and then we're going to go for break. Okay, so if I go back to edit task options wizard. So this is the same form we've been playing in all along. And I go to client date options. There's a big green button here at the bottom. Okay, if I click that, it allows me to set up the template comment that is used to send out all the emails. So right now, this is the one for HST Quarterly. So you can see this is what we call a merge field. So it's going to merge in the client's actual name in place of this placeholder. And this is a list here on the right of all the different things that we can merge into this email. But the important one is if we go to so if you look near the top of this list here, the important one here is there's the task in-house due date, there's the due date, there's the task calendar date, and we have the task client info date, it's right there, and then this one here, client documents and instructions. Okay, so you can see that I've got the client document instructions merge field. So if I delete this and I click client documents and instructions, it inserts that merge field. So this actually represents the list of documents. So if I requested 10 documents, this merge field will be replaced by that point form list of the 10 documents that I requested from the client. So and you can see below here it says, please submit to us the required documents we need by, and it's going to insert the merge field for task client info deadline date. Okay, so I'm going to highlight all this, and I'm just going to go copy, and we're going to go down to the new monthly bookkeeping we've set up. I'm going to delete the default, and I'm going to paste in the template that I much prefer. So it has the client documents and instructions, it has the client task info deadline date, and that sort of thing. It has all the wording that I like, and I'm going to save this. Okay, so that means that any email that I set up for monthly bookkeeping will use this particular format. So if we go back and we go to our new client here, so I can click the individual thing, or I can go notify all above. and choose email. So an email is going to be sent to Sam and go finish. So now it's set up an email with all of that information in it. All right, so I think it's a great place to finish. So as soon as we come back from break, I'm going to go over actually sending out the emails, and then we're going to look at a bunch of other things, and then we'll talk about the portal. Okay, so let's take a let's say a 10-minute break. So we're going to come back at 20 minutes past 2 in Eastern Standard Time, so 20 minutes past the hour, and we'll continue where we left off. Okay, welcome back. Okay, so let's get started again. So we've covered a lot of ground, and we're starting to get into the a lot of the new functionality that we just recently released, and we're very proud of because it adds another layer to the ClientTrack experience. But it also gives you a lot of new tools that you didn't necessarily have before with ClientTrack in terms of being able to request specific documents from clients now. And I want to talk a little bit about this because it goes back to the philosophy and why we built this into the program and the conversations that we've had with focus groups in terms of the clients that use ClientTrack and what they want from the program. So it's important to acknowledge that, you know, we have the ideal world and we have the real world. And in the real world, our clients can sometimes drive us nuts in terms of bringing the information in late. It's incomplete. So sometimes we feel that we're much more like babysitters than we are accounting professionals because we're constantly chasing our clients and asking for missing information and begging them to get the information incomplete. And then they forget something, so we have to chase them all over again. And it induces a lot of inefficiencies into our office because if we send an email to the client and say, hey, you know, thank you for bringing your stuff in a week ago, but it turns out you forgot a credit card statement, clients invariably are going to call us up, and instead of taking the time to try and find the email and realize what they're missing, they're just going to call our office again and say, hey, I remember you told me something about I was missing something. I didn't feel like looking up the email. What is it that you're missing? So whoever they're talking to now has to stop what they're doing, and they have to take the time to research and figure out what's missing. So either they have to transfer the call to somebody else and waste their time, or they have to run around, find a file, try and find a sticky note and all that type of stuff. And it ends up, you know, a lot more inefficient for us. So by adding this functionality, and we're giving the ability for the client to see what's missing, and they can also log in at any time and they can see in real time exactly what it is missing. They can see what they need to bring, and so on and so forth. So it's certainly by no means a perfect system, but it's a big step towards enabling your clients to be a lot more efficient in terms of how they take your time and that sort of thing. But the other big thing, and again, I want to stress this, and I know I've said this a few times now, but it's a big, huge return on investment for the clients that have implemented this fully, is the info deadline date. So the info deadline date is just one more piece of information. It's just simply a date, but the ramifications can be quite large because now, one, you're giving the client a very specific hard deadline that they now have to get the information to you. So instead of a loosey-goosey time frame, which allowed the client to bring the information to you at the last minute, you're saying no. You have to give us the information by this deadline date. And if you're very clear about it, it becomes a very powerful date. And when I say clear, I mean from a contractual purpose. So if you sit down with your clients, and I know sometimes it's difficult to have conversations with your existing clients, when you're onboarding a new client, this conversation is a lot easier because you can simply start the conversation with, this is the way I work. But with your existing clients, you can say, okay, this is how we are going to change the paradigm a little bit. I am going to give you more information by telling you exactly what I need from you instead of just simply saying I need documents from you. And in exchange for that, I'm also going to expect you to fulfill the date that I'm going to include in the email. And if you can do that, then I will reward you. And when we reevaluate the contract of your services next year, either we'll keep the rates the same, or if you do really well, you can even have a further incentive where you reduce the rates a little bit, because, and that's to your advantage. Even though you're reducing your rate, you're probably making a lot more money at the end of the day per hour than with the client that you have to chase. So by reducing your rate, say by $2, your return on the client is still much, much better because you didn't have to waste 30 hours on that client over the year chasing and for missing information. So and we've had this conversation. So this idea wasn't necessarily ours, but it's been given to us by our clients through the focus groups, and they found it really powerful. So we've had a number of clients that have actually implemented this system in terms of they've drafted up a contract, they've had a meeting with all the clients, they explained the new system in terms of how the deadline date works, and they've seen huge results. So I just want to share that with you because we're all really, really busy. But sometimes it's hard to stick our head above the pile of paperwork and actually look overall at how our business runs and change it from the ground up. Sometimes it's easier just to say, no, I'll worry about changing the system next month. This month is way too busy. Then you get to next month and say, no, I've got my vacation coming up with my family. I'll deal with it when I come back from vacation. And then the summer's gone by, and now you're back into, September and that type of thing, and you got year ends to do. So the sooner you just sort of say stop, take a breath, and look, let's change the paradigm so I'm not constantly in a situation where I feel like I'm scrambling at the last minute. And this is important because if you can eliminate the scrambling in the last minute and all that kind of stuff, then you're opening yourself up to taking on more clients, which obviously means more revenue, and you're opening yourself up to grow your business by taking on additional staff, whether they're contract staff that work remotely or maybe people work in your office, because they can come in and they can be integrated with your system very, very quickly because they have internal instructions that tell them exactly how to do every single job for every single client, which you've documented through our internal documents and instructions. And you can also shift workloads. So if one person gets too busy, it's very easy for other staff to take on the workload of that particular person because, again, they can do the bookkeeping for a client they've never worked on because the internal procedures are documented very clearly, right? And all of this filters through the online portal. So if you have people working remotely, they never see the desktop software. They just log in through the portal and they can see their workload. They can see what documents are in. They can interact with their clients. They can do all that. And I'm going to touch on exactly how that works, obviously, a little bit later in the demo. So I apologize if I'm, talking a lot about this, but I think that's very, very important. And that's one of the intents on why we love doing these particular Client Track Workshop webinar series is because we can have these conversations. We can show you these are how other clients have solved the problems, and this is their return on investment. And we tried many, many things, and some things don't work as well as we thought, and other things work way better. And this particular documents, instructions, and portal has been one of the features that we've seen work really, really well for our clients, which is why we've spent a lot of time working on it. All right. So after explaining all that, let's actually start looking a little bit more on the training side of things. So what we're going to do is I've got half an hour until 3 o'clock, and I'm going to finish the training on the Client Track desktop side. We're going to take another quick break, and then we're going to come back and I'm going to show you the portal for the last bit, and then we'll finish up, and then I'll see some of you guys for tomorrow's session where we'll get into the project management and the time and billing, as well as a few things that I didn't cover today in terms of things like the address book, personal tax list, and so on and so forth. Okay, so we've scheduled all the tasks and we've set up a nice little assembly line, and we defined how that assembly line works in terms of when the email goes out, when the deadline date shows up, and all that type of stuff. So that's all well and good. So basically everything I've shown you up until now is what we call the setup. So now we're going to look at how you use Client Track on a day-to-day basis. Okay. So when you come in, probably the first thing you're going to do is you're going to go to View Tasks. Okay, so the View Task takes all the tasks that are scheduled for all your clients and shows you in a nice comprehensive view and say, okay, these are all the tasks that are due by the end of this month. Okay. All right, so the default layout is this, and you can see that we've added a bunch of new columns based on the information that we've added with this new update. So by default, we have a couple flag columns here. So you can indicate this flag here indicates this is a priority. The next red one indicates that there's a problem of some kind, and you can type in the note. So if you click on the note, you would be able to enter in what the note is. So you could do a date stamp, which puts today's date and time in, and you'd be able to say, okay, there's an issue with whatever, and you would enter what the problem is. Okay, and the third little flag here is a yellow one. It represents that there's missing information. Okay, so it's just a way for you to visually flag what the overall status is with this task. The hourglass icon here represents that this task is past due, meaning the due date was supposed to be June 15th, and of course it has not yet been closed, so the hourglass shows up for tasks that are past due. So you can see the client name, the task name, the due date, the employee assigned, and the task status. So the task status is a new field. Okay, so if you guys are long-term ClientTrack users and you've used our personal tax section, then you're going to recognize that so we used to, in the personal tax section, we call it return status. So it's exactly the same, but we've implemented that now on the task side. So you can set the status and you say, okay, the status is awaiting client, assigned file, in progress, on hold for questions, missing info, other, in review, e-filed, finalized, and completed. Okay, so it's just your way of doing it. So you can say, okay, this file is now in progress. Now with the received all info here, so this is the client info deadline date. So it tells you the date that the information needs to come in, and you can manually click the received all info, and what it's now going to do is it's now showing you that the information is received late based on the fact that the information for this task was supposed to come in by May 31st, but it arrived on June 19th. Now this received all checkmark is also automatically checked if you go to view info and you check off all the items that are in the client documents required, or you can check them off in here on the desktop side, or if the client actually did this themselves by logging into the portal and giving you all the documents that you requested. Any one of those three options changes the received all docs, meaning you manually clicked it, or you chose and clicked all the client required documents here, or the client logged into the portal and did it. Okay, so and of course the received status is a built-in text that tells you the items. So you can see that again, we were supposed to get the information for this task by June 15th, so it's telling us that it's past due. So we're still waiting for that information. All right. The number of days in progress shows us the number of days that this file has been in progress from the day that the received check marks has been checked. So we will then count the number of days. So we start this counter only when you finally received all of the information. Because if you're still waiting for the client to bring their stuff in, there's no point in setting a counter. You can't work on it anyway. So the start date for our number of days in progress counter represents the date when the received check mark has been checked by any one of the three means. So you can see in this case here, the information was brought in June 6th. It was supposed to be brought in by May 24th. It has now been active in your office for 13 days based on the fact that the information was brought in on June 6th. Okay, file location is a new field as well, so you'll recognize this also from our T1 section. So you can indicate where the file is. So the file for this job is in, the filing cabinet 34, for example. All right, and then we have the ability for you to set up an assembly line. So I'll show you how this works. So if I go to View HUD Columns, so this is how you can change which columns you're viewing in this particular information. Okay, so you can see here that you've got 25 different steps. So this is another way to be able to identify sort of an assembly line. So you can see that I have an assembly line here of assigned file, process, review, finalize, and signature. So once we get the information from the client, we can sort of set up an internal assembly line that, okay, we've assigned a file, it's been processed, it's been reviewed, finalized, signature, that kind of thing. So, and this assembly line is the same for all tasks, whether it's a T5, T4, HST, bookkeeping, payroll, that type of thing. in the project section gives you the power and flexibility to have a completely different assembly line assigned to where every step is assigned to a different person. It's very, very applicable. For example, when you do, say, year ends, like notice to readers, you'd be able to say, okay, for this notice to reader, I need an assembly line that has exactly 7 steps. But when you do a notice to reader for a different client, you say, no, for this client, I need an assembly line that has only 4 steps. Okay, so the project section is much more versatile. So the steps here are sort of generic for the tasks. Okay, the project is a more advanced version. All right, so if you're working on this, you can say I've assigned the file, I processed it. Now you can see that the color changes depending on which step I done. So the finalize turns it a nice green color. And the way you set that up is you go View HUD Columns, and if you go Define Status Info, you can see that beside each label there's a color box, and you can define what color that row will change to when different check marks have been checked. So it's a very nice visual indicator of how you're doing, because you can go, say, from a red to a yellow to a green depending on the progress of that particular task. All right, if you click just outside every check mark, you can see the date and the name of the person that checked that particular check mark. All right, one of the other things I want to show you is the custom columns. Okay, so if I go back here to View HUD Columns, you can see that we have down here, we have 5 different custom columns. So we always use custom columns as a way to be able to explain as a way to be able to record information that we don't have built in automatically to Client Track. Okay, so the custom column serves a couple of different things. So if I say, okay, I want to view the box number, and I click the little information button beside it, this is set to a standard field. So a standard field is basically you type in whatever you want into that particular field for any given task. Okay, so it's a normal field. So box numbers, like say file location, or I can say, let's call this status. Okay, and then the next one, I'm going to activate year end, and if I click the little information box beside it, you can see that this one's set up to a lookup field. And if I drop this down, I can actually look up any field. So let's say that for every task, I wanted to show me the business number for that particular client. So what I can do is, if I go down, I'm going to find business number in our list here. Okay, so there it is there, business number. And I'm going to click OK. So, and I'm going to change the name here to business number. All right. So, and I'm going to, so I've got a check mark beside both status and business number, and we go OK. So now if I scroll over, you can see that I've got a column here called status, and I have a column here called business number. Now, for any client where the business number already exists, it actually types in the business number. So right there, I can see the business number of the client, and I don't have to look it up or do anything. And this is also really good for a year-end date, so I can look up the year-end date. Okay, the status we set to a standard field. So status just means that I'm going to type in whatever I want. So I was going to write in typed information. Okay, so the standard field allows you to type in anything you want. So I can type in 34 if that's meaningful to you. Whereas a lookup field looks up information, whether it's a business number or an address or a telephone number or a year-end date or any other piece of information, and displays it in here so that I can see it right next to the task as a reference piece of information. But because it's a lookup, I can't edit it. So if I try and edit it and say this is a locked lookup field and cannot be edited. Okay, so but for this particular workshop client where we entered the business number, you can see that that's been entered. All right, so that's how those particular fields work. So the View HUD Columns gives you the ability to see whatever information you want and set up a little bit of an assembly line as well. Now, of course, if we edit, if I go to View Info and go to internal, we always have our internal instructions and procedures here as well. So just in the same way that we can check off the client side to indicate the client's given us certain things, we can also use this and say, okay, we've done the data entry, we've done the account reconciliation, we've done the data verification, we've calculated the remittance amount, we filed to the online My Account for the client, and then we've emailed the account to the thing. So it's a way for you to identify exactly what it is. And again, this internal list is available through a portal. So if you have remote people, they don't need access to their desktop version of ClientTrack. You can use that to control everything on your computer. But when they log into the portal, say on the other side of Canada, they can see the tasks that you've assigned them to, and they can see the instructions they need to complete, and they can mark off tasks as completed. So the portal gives you a remote way and your staff of remotely logging in from anywhere, so that you have a lot more versatility in terms of the remoteness of your information. All right. So that's pretty much the task list section, but the other major thing I want to show you is the advanced search. Okay, so the advanced search allows you to search for a client in many different ways. Okay, so by default, the search that came up is all uncompleted tasks where the due date is somewhere in June, so June 1st to June 30th. Now, you have to be conscious of the due dates, because this is saying from June 1st to June 30th. But if that means there are uncompleted tasks due in May and April and January, they're not going to show up on this list, because you've been very, very specific in saying, okay, only tasks with a due date is between June 1st and 30th. So maybe a better advanced search is go advanced search. And what you're going to do is you're going to go to search dates. And instead of searching for a discrete date range between June 1st and June 30th, you are going to say that I want to search for all tasks on or before June 30th. Okay, so what it does is it takes all those tasks and anything that is uncompleted, because we're searching filter here says search by closed status, show only on unclosed items, because if the task is completed, generally you don't need to see it on your active list anymore. Okay, where the due date is anywhere between June 30th or before. If it's after June 30th, I'm not really worried about it. I'm going to worry about it next month. All right, the other thing you could be conscious of is this is searching due dates. But what you may want to do is you may want to change it to in-house due dates, because the in-house due date is maybe a lot more relevant to you, because that's the date you have to get the task done, not necessarily by the due date. Okay, so you're going to say, okay, I want to see where all tasks with the in-house due date is before June 30th. And you can see that you can search by any one of the dates, including info deadline dates or receive date and that sort of thing. So we're going to choose info deadline. In-house. All right, and then I can, if I want to, I can filter the task by a particular client. So I want to see only DM Auto Body Shop, for example. I can filter the task by a certain type. I want to say, okay, I only want to see bookkeeping type tasks or HST tasks, that kind of thing. Okay, and then I can filter based on the employee assigned or the supervising partner, managing accountant. Okay, and then the last thing down here is we have the ability to search for tasks and project steps or just tasks. So we're going to choose just tasks. Now the project steps are going to be a little bit more clear, because we're going to talk about that tomorrow. But the show only tasks is a way to filter out the project steps. All right, and then I can search status. So I can say, okay, well, I only want to see tasks where the status is set to in progress, or we're waiting for the client kind of thing. I can search based on tasks where the received info. So this is another important one that you probably want to do, because you may want to filter the search and say, well, there's no point in looking at the task unless we've received all the information from the client in one form or another. So I'm going to filter the list based on all tasks for received all info. And then you can also search based on these check marks. So you can say, okay, I only want to do a search where the assigned file checkmark has been checked to the process. So you can see that there's hundreds of different ways to cut and slice this search. So it's very, very important that you understand how this works and you really utilize it, because it's an excellent way to cut through all the tasks and show you only tasks that are relevant to you. So I'll show you what I mean. Okay, we're going to say, okay, I want to see only unclosed tasks assigned to David, where the due date is anywhere between June 30th and the end of the month, but I'm only interested in tasks where the information has been received. So it says show only tasks where the information has been received. Okay, and I'm not going to worry about any of these. Now, this is a search that I do over and over and over again. So instead of having to come in here, click Advanced Search, and do all this over and over again, I'm going to save this search. So I'm going to call this David current received. Okay, and I'm going to save that. So by saving it, it saved all my search parameters. So I'm going to go Save Search. Now the form that comes up then says, okay, do you want to save this static or monthly date search? I'm going to change to the monthly. Now what that does is when I set the date range of this particular search before I saved it, I set the date range to June 30th. Now that's only because we're currently in the month of June and I only want to see tasks up to the end of this month. But when I save it and I call this search up next month and in August and in October, I don't want the date to be set to June, which is the case if I set it to static. So if I set it to static, it's going to hard code June 30th as the end date. But what I want is I want ClientTrack to be a bit smarter than that. I want ClientTrack to realize that I only selected June 30th because it's the end of this month. But when I open this search and access it, I want the search to come up and show me all tasks to the end of whatever month it is. So when I open this up July 1st, I wanted to show me all tasks by the end of July 1st. Okay, and then we go okay, and we say, so now the question is saying, okay, you're saving a search. So would you like this saved search to be available to all other users, or do you only want it to be available to you? Now, in my case, I have only assign the search to myself. So this is really only a search that would be more applicable to me. So it's asking me, would you like to make the save search available to all users in ClientTrack, or would you like the save search only available to you? So it says click yes to make the search available to everyone, or click no to make the search available only to you. So I'm going to choose no. Okay, and we go okay, and I'm going to go perform search. Okay, so no tasks have come up because nothing fulfills that query, but you can see that it's showing me very clearly all uncompleted tasks where the information has been received, showing only tasks excluding any project steps with the in-house due date on or before June 30th assigned to David Merritt. Okay, now that saved search is here. So you can see that I've got a bunch of different saved searches here. Okay, so so if I want to do a quick search for all tasks this week or this month, I can do that, and we're back to our default. Now if I click the little information icon beside that saved search, I can manage my searches. So the first thing I can do is I can say, okay, David current month is my default search. So I'm going to select this check mark and say the general default search. And again, this is specific for my user as David. So each user can have their own favorite default search. Then there's a check mark below here, and it says check this box if you would like to apply the default search in this list when you first start the program. So the idea is that immediately when I open the program and come to the task list, it's going to show me my default search right on the screen without me having to do anything, which is very handy. Now if I go to manage user specific searches, what I can do is I can indicate which staff member can see which searches. So for example, if I click David, these are the searches that David can see. If I click James, James can only see this search. So when James logs in and drops this drop down, James is only going to see the HST month search. James is not going to see any David searches because that's not applicable to James. James is not interested in looking at David searches or Matt searches. Okay, but if we go Smith, then that person can see the search. So you have a list of all your users, you have a list of all the available searches, and you can individually indicate which searches are visible to which users. Okay, so that's another powerful feature. And of course, we built that in because what ends up happening is if you have, say, 5 staff members and each of those staff members are saving 5 favorite searches, you now have 25 favorite searches saved in the system. But for any user, only 5 of them are applicable to that given user. So it just allows you to be very specific on which searches are available and applicable to the individual users. Okay, so all these things are little things, but they make a big difference because it's all about being productive. It's about being able to access information very, very quickly and knowing that the information is clear and concise and that sort of thing. All right, so the next concept that we're going to look at is the missing information problem. So everything we've talked about up to now is a process of sending an email to the client, assuming the client's going to give us all the information and allowing the client to be able to very easily see what they need and by what date they need to bring it. But no matter how good we are at that and how diligent our clients are, there's always going to be cases of missing information, meaning the client brought the initial information in, and when we open up the file to go to work on it, we realize, whoops, the client forgot some receipts, or they forgot a specific credit card statement, or I have a question that the client needs to answer in order for me to finish this job. So a missing information does not have to be a physical document. It can also be a question that you need answered in order to finish the job. So let's take a look at that process. So the thing about missing information is you obviously don't normally find out about missing information until you're actually working on the job well after the client has actually brought their stuff in. So the received check mark has already been put into play. You've received it, and it's after that you realize that you're missing something. So let's say that I'm working on this bi-weekly employee payroll for DM Auto Body Shop. Okay. So the client brought the information in, and the first thing you're going to do is you're going to hit that little yellow flag, and it's just a visual indicator to everybody else that there's something missing on this job. Then what you're going to do is you're going to set the task status to on hold for missing info. So you're clearly saying this job is on hold, and you're saying why, because there's missing info. So then you click on the client's name, DM Auto Body Shop, and it takes you back to that client. So now we're at that client, and we're going to go to the More Info tab. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to record exactly what it is that we're missing. Okay, so I'm going to go to Add New Missing Information, and I'm going to record what it is. So I can identify, is this a missing document or is this an outstanding question? So I'm going to say, let's say that we're missing the visa statement ending in 456. Okay, and the item's recorded by me for the client, DM Auto Body Shop. And then in the description, I want to put enough information, not only that the client can easily identify exactly what I need, but also anyone else that I work with in the office. Because if the client calls in and says, hey, I forgot what I'm missing, you want anyone to be able to read this and talk to the client without having to transfer the call to you, without that person having to get out of their chair to find the file. You want all the information that's on the screen so they don't have to look anything up. So we're going to say we need the visa statement for June 2018 for card ending in 456. So in this case, that's enough information both for the client and for any one of my colleagues looking at this. So I'm now going to send an email to the client. So I'm going to go send notification to client and choose email and go finish. And it says, hi, we're working on your file. We have the missing information. I'm going to go finish. All right, so there's the email, okay, automatically addressed to the client. And it says, hi, we're working on your file, and we notice we need the following document. The document is a visa statement ending, and then it puts in the description that you entered. It says, we appreciate your time. You can respond as soon as possible. We can complete your work in a timely manner. Be much appreciated. And it says, thank you from the ABC company team, and you send this off. Now, again, this is automatically linked directly to the portal. So that missing information is now recorded in the portal. So if the client logs in, they can see exactly a list of all the things that they're missing. Okay, so you don't have to do anything else. That portal integration is a seamless process in the background where the desktop and the portal talk to each other to let each other know what's going on. So you only need to add it here in the desktop. You set it, you forget it. So because we sent the email, because we did the action of sending a notification to client this button, ClientTrack has recorded that you've sent an email to the client on June 19th and the item's recorded by David. Okay, and we go OK. So now there is a list of what you need. Now there could be 3 or 4 different things in this list of missing information. So I'm just going to quickly add another one. So let's say we have a question, and this is added by somebody else. So let's say that Lisa added this, and Lisa has a financial question. Okay, and so here, because we chose outstanding question, it changed it a little bit at the bottom. So you type the question on the left, and then eventually when you get the answer from the client, you enter it on the right. So if the client calls in and they talk to the office manager can ask the question, record the answer, submit this, so that the original accountant who actually logged this and needs information can see the documented answer. So once again, I'll just write, financial question. Okay, and I'm going to send a notification to the client, and we'll go email. Okay, but I want to show you what's going on here. Okay, so now this is a second email. Hi, we're working on a file. We have the following question, and types it in. But what it does is it says we also have the following additional documents that still need to be submitted to us, and it tells them again about that visa statement that they still haven't given us. Okay, so all subsequent emails will be smart enough to include and say, hey, we got something new for you, but just a reminder, this is the stuff we're still waiting for that you've previously been notified about. All right, so we include that. So now, okay, so this is really interesting. Okay, so there's a feature in ClientTrack that we added in about 6 months ago, and it's an internal notification feature by pop-up. So what it's telling me is ClientTrack's smart enough to realize that I'm logged in as David, but I recorded a missing information under the name of Lisa. And ClientTrack realizes that Lisa herself did not record this, but David did. So ClientTrack just popped up with a pop-up saying, would you like to notify Lisa by pop-up to let them know that the financial question and missing information item has been assigned to them? So I can say yes. And if I do that, say yes, then Lisa is going to receive a pop-up immediately and say, hey, just a heads up, David just recorded a missing item assigned under your name. Okay, now I'm going to be talking more about that notification feature tomorrow in tomorrow's session, because you can enable that notification for all kinds of actions, not only for missing information, but many, many other things within the program. Okay, one other thing I want to show you is, let's say the 2 weeks has passed and the client still has not given you the visa statement and not answered the financial question. So these are still outstanding, because ultimately we're trying to resolve these. So when the client finally resolves these, we're going to click the resolve check mark. Now, and let's say you realize that these have not been fulfilled and you want to send an email right now to the client to remind them yet again that they need to answer the question and give you this. So you click this icon here and choose email, and then it'll just basically generate a new email that lists all of the different items here. All right, so the okay, so then eventually when the client finally either gives you the document through the portal or drops it in the front door, you can go, you can just click the resolve check mark. And if you click just outside, it'll show you the information. So if I go to view info, I can see that this item's been resolved. It shows you the date, the name of the person, and then I would be able to type in whatever answer the client gave me here. All right, so, and then when that comes in, when we're working on that task, I can now set this task back to in progress. I can remove the flag that something's missing, and away we go, and we can keep going with this particular task. So going back to that more info tab, I want to explain a few of the other features and functionality you have here. So here we've given you another series of custom fields. So this is the kind of place as based on each client. And let's say that you want to record who referred this client to you. So you go define custom fields, and I'm going to say referred by. Okay, so once again, like any other custom field, this label is the same for all clients and whatever I type in. So let's say this came from a lawyer's office. So a lawyer's office referred this client to you. Okay, so you would be able to put in the name of the lawyer's office. Okay, so that's a good example of the kind of custom fields that you might use here. The RC59 form allows you to indicate that you have full permission. The form has been filed and completed, and you can indicate the date that you got that authorization from the client was, say, May 1st. Okay, so it just allows you to record and document the specific RC59 information. The client checklist is, think of it like a permanent file. So I've shown you already that you can request a checklist of documents for every single specific task. But this particular client checklist is more meant for the client's permanent file. So when you onboard a new client, there are certain things that you need as one-time actions from them. You need them to sign your privacy policy. You need them to give you a photocopy of their sales permit. You need them to sign your professional contract. There's those kind of things. So we're going to go customize list. So we'll change the first one to, say, privacy policy. The next one to, for example, sales permit copy. We'll call this main contract. So when you get a new client, you can indicate, yes, we've received the privacy policy. Yes, we got a copy of the sales permit. Now these check marks are the same where you can use a triple check. So if I click twice, it becomes grayed out. So this is a nice way to say, okay, we need them to sign the main contract, but they haven't yet. So the blank option indicates we don't need it at all, or it's not applicable. And the grayed out option says, hey, we need this done, but it still has not been completed by the client. And then eventually when the client actually gives it to you, you can say, okay, now it's totally 100% completely done. So this is sort of like a checklist for the client's permanent file. All right, so that brings us to the last option here, which is the client communication. So I'm going to talk about this, and then we're going to go for a quick break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to take a look at the portal. So the client communication is a very important feature of ClientTrack, and it really completes the program as what's called a CRM. So CRM stands for Contact Management Solution, and the idea is that when you have a CRM type software, that software should manage all the communications that you do with the client, so that you and everybody else in your office can see a detailed itinerary of the important conversations that you've had and what's happened, so that everybody understands exactly the sequence of events and the status and that kind of thing, including communications. So we call client communication. Now, it could be text messages, it could be emails, it could be phone calls, it could be face-to-face meetings, that kind of thing. So let's do two examples. So I'm going to click the button here, Add New Communication. Now, for your reference, I don't have to be at a client. So if I click this green Add New Communication under DM Auto Body Shop in a More Info tab, it knows that I'm adding a communication specifically for DM Auto Body Shop. But let's say I'm in the task section and the phone call rings and I want to record that. I can access these icons down here. So the phone here allows me to record that this is a phone call. So it gives me access to that. The only difference is I would have to manually pick which client I'm talking to, whereas if I'm on the client itself, it already knows which client I'm on. So if I click here, it automatically fills in the client's name in the option. That's the only difference. Okay, so these are quick link icons to quickly let you access the ability. This one here is the missing information, and this one over here is the CommLog. So let's say that the client calls in, And first of all, we can classify different types of communication. So if you click this little information icon, it gives you a list of the different types of communication. So we have incoming phone call. Now I have two for internal note. So internal note's kind of nice, and I really recommend you add this to your list. So internal note is that you're just working on the file and you haven't spoken or had a direct communication with the file, but you want to leave a note about something that you uh, is of interest to you on the client's file. So let's say that you're working on a thing and you realize the client is trying to write off a whole bunch of business expenses that you don't feel are appropriate, and you want to make a note of that, so you've documented that you had that concern, and that concern is now documented in the file. So that's what an internal note would be. Okay, so I have incoming phone call, I have outgoing phone call, I have meeting, and I have internal note. Okay, but you could add things like Skype, text message, all the other ways that you communicate with the client. So I'm going to say we had an incoming phone call. The incoming versus outgoing phone call is really nice because just by selecting one or the other, I'm differentiating very clearly whether I called the client or whether the client called me, which is a piece of information which is nice to have after the fact. So let's say that you had an incoming phone call from a client, and the client has accounting questions. Okay, and you can fill this in as you're talking to the client. So you can do a date stamp, and you would just type, because you might have a headless phone set, and you would just quickly say, hey, the client just called me. They had these two questions, and these are the professional answers I gave to the client. The client's all nice and happy. You've answered the question. And what you're going to do is you're going to click the resolve check mark to indicate that this item is now resolved, and it date stamps the day that you resolved it in your name, and you click OK. So this now gets recorded, but there's no action required. The item's been resolved, which tells ClientTrack not to do anything with it. It's simply there as a source of information so that you can see a sequence of communications you have. All right, let's do another scenario. So I'm going to go add new communication entry, and we're going to drop this down, and we're going to say, once again, incoming phone call. Now, let's say the client has more questions, but in my second scenario, I'm not available. So let's say that Susan has picked up the phone. We'll select Susan, and the client is asking for me. So Susan's going to put my name as the intended recipient. Okay. So Susan's going to say, I'm sorry, David's not available. David's in a meeting right now. Can I leave him a message in what you want? And the client says, sure. And the client would ramble off, I want, and they would list the question. So Susan would just put the question here, and Susan would say, okay, thank you very much. I'll have David call you as soon as he's available again. So the difference here is Susan's going to put my name as the intended recipient, which specifically tells ClientTrack that I'm the person that needs to take ownership of this communication entry, even though Susan has received it. And the second thing Susan's going to do is she's not going to check the resolve check mark, because she wants to make sure that ClientTrack understands that this item is not resolved, i.e. that further action needs to be taken on this. So Susan's going to click OK. Okay, so both items are now listed in the list. Anyone can go in and they can see and read and understand the scope of the communication that's happened with these items. But the second one is assigned to David and has not been resolved. So when David comes back, David's going to see a pop-up on the screen saying, hey, just to be aware, Susan just assigned you a telephone call. You need to call client ABC back and let them know, for example, that they need to be called back, kind of thing. Okay, so but let's say David was out of the office, and when David comes back tomorrow, let's say 3 calls came in the day before. So we're going to go to client communication. This window is going to pop up automatically when ClientTrack starts up tomorrow when David logs in. So David is going to see this window pop up and say, oh, there's 2 outstanding communications that have been assigned specifically to me. So David can expand the window and say, okay, one of them is from DM Auto Body Shop. And David would be able to read the item, so he can go more info. And if he goes date stamp, he can add, okay, call the client back, answer their question, and be able to type in information. And when the call is over, David then checks the resolve check mark to say now the call is resolved. So you'll be able to see the difference in the date between when the date of the call that came in and the date ultimately that you resolved it. So this is a nice way for you to identify that if your goal is to always return calls to clients within 24 hours, you can identify that that is in fact happening by comparing the receive date to the resolve date. Okay, and we go okay. And then David can do the other thing. So he's got an outstanding call here for sample overhead to our manufacturer as well. So if he closes this and then it comes back and opens it again, it's going to show him just the one outstanding call that he still needs to make. So he's already completed the second one. Okay, and then this call here got resolved on the screen as well. So what this does is it gives you a really complete and cool call logging system where, one, the calls are all documented logs so that everybody can see a sequence of communication. So there's no he said, she said type thing. Second is it's a very powerful missed call log that happens all the time. So office managers can take all the incoming calls and assign them to people where they need the person to call the client back. And everything's documented. So you can see the sequence. You can see, okay, this call came in on this day. It was returned on this day. Here's the initial communication. Here's the secondary communication. Okay, so that's a nice feature as well. All right, so let's take a quick 5-minute break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the portal, and I'm going to wrap up in about 20 minutes, so we'll wrap up on time. All right, but I just want to take a 5-minute break just so you can digest everything, and then we're going to launch right into the portal, and I'm going to show you how quick and easy it is. Okay, thank you very much, and I'll see you in about 5 minutes. Okay, welcome back. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the portal, and I've mentioned this quite a few times over the demo and presentation. So the portal is very easy to show you, and that's why I've left it to the end, and we'll wrap up on time. Now, I want to explain what the intent is. So first of all you need to do is open up a browser, and you just go to a new tab, and you're going to type in www.clienttrackportal. Okay, so and there's a login button here on the left. Now the neat thing is if you want to link directly on your website to go directly here so that your clients can actually access the portal and login from your website, all you have to do is hyperlink to this particular link here, clienttrackportal.com/login, and that will take them directly here from your website. So the idea is that this login page is the exact same whether you as the accounting professional logging in or whether the client logs in. So give me a sec here. I've got a username and password. Now naturally you obviously for security purposes wouldn't want to have your username and password in a text file, but of course I just have that because I'm doing a demo here for you today. So we're going to put in the username, and I'm going to copy the password for our demo file here. Okay. So this is a global user account. So I'm logging in from the point of view as a global user, i.e. the accountant. So what it allows me to do is allows me to basically to see a snapshot of everything that's in ClientTrack but through a browser. Okay. So while this is loading, I'll show you how to do it. So to set this up, all you have to do is send us an email, request a portal, and you're going to go to File. You're going to click this button, Synchronize with the Online Portal, and you, in the window that pops up, you just specify that you want to synchronize every morning, every hour, twice a day, that kind of thing. And from that point forward, you never have to worry about it. While ClientTrack, the desktop, is working, it will synchronize with the online portal system in the background. You never have to worry about it, think about it, or activate it. So what you get is if you click the list here. Now, if I expand the option here, I can see a more detailed version of what the menu on the left does. And I can collapse it. So the cloud here represents the company. So this is a list of all of your companies. So at the high level, it gives you the telephone number, the address, their username, and that kind of thing. So, and you can see here that there's a portal access check mark. So I have right now the ability to allow 25 of my clients to log in. And so far I've checked off this check mark. So if I want to give them access, all I have to do is click beside the client, and it comes up with a message saying you were about to sign a client up for the portal. If this is their first time giving the client portal access, they will receive an email with their login credentials. Is this okay? And you would say yes or no. Now I'm going to hit cancel because this is just a test. But what you'll get is this is the email the client will receive. Okay, so the client's going to get this email, and it says, "Hi, DM Auto Body Shop. You have been signed up for the ClientTrack portal by David's firm," and that kind of thing. So it gives you the login credentials and the link. So I'm going to come back to this moment. A list of all the business contacts. I can see a list of all my personal tax contacts. And if I click the blue eye here, I can see a lot more information. I can see their business information, their spouse information, family members, all the same information that's in the desktop. I can see a list of the tasks. Okay. And again, you can indicate, have you closed the task? Have you received all the documents? And then the ability for you to indicate, can the client see the tasks? Okay, so a lot of these are exactly the same as the columns in the desktop. So you have in-house due date, you have due date, employee assigned, period end date, and then you have details. So if you go details, you would be able to see all the information, but including the documents and instructions. So this would be a list of the client documents and then the internal. Okay, so it's all there. So let's just go down here. So I'm just doing a quick search for DM Auto, and it came up with DM Auto. And if I click here, and so there is an example of what the document's instructions. So I can see on the client side that there's a Visa statement, there's a TD credit card, there's a PayPal login, there's all that type of information, and I would be able to see that information. Okay, so I can check this off where we received it, but I can also upload files. So you can see that I'm telling the cloud system that we're hoping to get the Visa statement ending in 2345, but we haven't received a file. So I would actually be able to upload it. So if I click upload, then I can actually drag any file. So I can take a file here. So okay, so I'm just going to make this smaller. So I can take this icon and I can drag this in here and I can upload it. So I have now uploaded what would be the Visa, and it's automatically checked off that we received this. And that check mark automatically gets checked off in the desktop side too. So for example, if I go to tasks and I were to find that same task and go view info and go to client in, it would check off that same check mark here as well. So the two systems work together. Okay, and again, once the client has logged in and checked these off themselves by uploading all the documents, then you would see the received all check mark automatically get checked as well. Okay, so and that brings us to the File Explorer. So the way our system works is we automatically create a cloud-based folder for every client. So this folder is already shared with DM Auto Body Shop if you give them access. So we have a folder called DM Auto Body Shop, and by default, we automatically create a folder for every year, and then we create a folder for HST monthly and employee payroll. So the moment you or the client upload a requested document for that particular task, we create this folder structure automatically. So you don't have to come in here and create hundreds of folders for HST monthly by the year. So if I click on HST monthly, I can see all the files that either myself or the client has uploaded into this particular folder. If I want to download, all I have to do is click on this and it'll automatically download that file down in the bottom corner, and I can open that up on my computer, or I can upload files. I can add new folders if I want to. So if I click add a folder, I can say that this is not only HST, but let's say this is HST, June 2018. Okay, so I'm getting a little bit more specific. Okay, so now I've got another folder. So you have the ability to add additional folders on top of the ones that we automatically add for you. So if I go back to DM Auto Body Shop, so here's a folder that I added as another demo. So it's called Finished T2 and Files. So you can throw all your finished work into one nice folder for DM Auto Body Shop. So when that client remotely logs in, they can download all the completed T2 and financial statements and working papers and notice to readers and notice of assessments, and all that type of stuff will be stored in here permanently as a cloud storage. So our cloud storage is exactly the same as Dropbox and ShareFile and all the others in terms of we use banking level security. Our advantage is because we're a Canadian company, we've ensured that all of our files stay in Canada, which, for example, ShareFile and Dropbox can't make that same claim because they're an American company, so they often use American data servers. But ours is Canada only, so your information stays within Canada. You can upload as many files as you want. So if you want to use this as more of a permanent file storage for all your other files, you can talk to us and we'd be happy to look at storing your files here. But basically, this file service works and operates exactly the same way as Dropbox and ShareFile and that kind of thing. one of the things that we're adding very quickly, and actually probably be done within the week, is we're adding a secure file share feature where you or the client can share files with other people outside the system. So let's say you want to send a working paper to a lawyer or another accountant. You can specifically share that file with that lawyer as a one-time share, and that would be through a link. So we have that ability as well. Okay, you have the ability to chat to the client, so you can actually do a chat system and you can send chats to the client back and forth and do that kind of thing. So if we go back, I'm just going to go back to this particular icon. So this is the email where we've invited a client. So I'm going to copy this here. Okay, and I'm going to go to portal, going to go to login, and I'm logging in now as the client. Okay, and I want to show you how this works. And as I said before, the client can get access to this login screen from your home page. So it becomes a little bit more professional from your side when they go to your website and they come to the this page from yours. And we go sign in. Okay, so the idea is that the client would log in, and you can access this equally through an Android or an iPhone as well. And they can sync their calendar with Google Calendar if they want to, and so can you. So you can sync your tasks and appointments with your Google Calendar system if you wanted to set that up. But effectively what happens is the client can basically see what tasks you are working on for them. So the client can see that you have a whole bunch of weekly, bi-weekly employee payroll. But more importantly, the client can see if you need any documents and instructions. So they can see that they still need to upload Susan Jones' payroll hours and Jeff Jackson's payroll hours. So they've already uploaded John Smith's, but they still need to do this. So they can do this on their own terms. And this interacts with the desktop, so it shows you in the desktop side whether or not they've done it. And eventually, when these last two have been uploaded, the received all documents checkmark gets checked, both on the portal side and on the desktop side, so that you know that you now have seen this. And you can go, if you go 2018 and you go to employee payroll, there is all the documents that have been uploaded to the system. So they're all nicely tucked into a folder structure that is created. So to create a folder for 2018 and then employee biweekly payroll. All right, and so this is the log out feature, and then the client can chat with you. But the other thing the client can see is they can see any missing information. So if you have missing information recorded, that would be recorded here as well. Okay, so see here in this item, it says there's 8 missing documents and instructions, and then this is tasks. Okay, so it's a great way to interact with the client and that kind of thing. But I really want to stress too that we know that probably most of your clients aren't interested in interacting with a system like this yet. Most people, honestly, they just want to drop off the paperwork the old-fashioned way in your front door, give you the paperwork and go. But the advantage is if you implement this now, and as more and more clients use it and log in, the system's there, and all you have to do is put that check mark beside the client as clients say, okay, you know what, maybe using that login system to give you files is now a good idea for me. Okay, so it gives you basically the best of both worlds. All right, so I think that wraps up the first half of our 2-day ClientTrack workshop. If you have any questions, like I said, please feel free to contact us, and I'll be more than happy to answer them. And if there's anything else we can do, just let us know. Okay, thank you.